All right, looks like it's 5:30, Mayor. You can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay, so good evening to everyone and welcome to our April 14, 2020 Vista Consolidated meeting. The meeting is now called to order and our City Clerk, Kathy Valdez, is going to conduct our roll call.
Thank you. Please say you're here or wave your hand when I call your name. Mayor Ritter.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Green.
Here.
And Councilmember Contreras.
Here.
All members are present. Oh, also joining us, are City Manager Patrick Johnson and City Attorney Daryl Piper.
Okay. In accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buena Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to Buena Sanitation District Ordinance 2006-1. So the next thing on our agenda is the approval of the agenda by our City Manager, Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no changes this evening.
Okay, this evening we have one presentation, and our City Manager, Patrick Johnson, is going to provide a COVID-19 update for us.
Thank you again, Mayor and members of the City Council. Good evening. Tonight, for this COVID-19 update, I want to brief you on issues that are happening with our workforce, what's going on in the community, and finally finish it up with discussing some financial implications, as well as talking about businesses and business opportunities. So those will be the two discussion items, so to speak, in this presentation. But over the last 2 weeks, the community has received your feedback, they've received your updates, and we've received actually a lot of positive feedback from that. In addition to not only ourselves as a city, but also the federal, county, state governments are also doing a lot of information to residents. And so we just urge them to, at this time, to abide by the local regulations that we have, the stay-at-home order, and hopefully that we'll all get through this crisis as it goes. I want to let you know that our critical staff, our essential critical staff, are still working. That includes both fire and law enforcement from the public safety side. We also have code enforcement, senior nutrition, and public works that is working around the clock, literally, in the last week. In addition to that, we also have the engineering and community development departments that are in full swing as construction is still going on and planning applications are coming in. So a majority of our workforce is working. We have approximately 80% of the workforce that has stayed working, and we have about 20% of the workforce that does not have immediate assignments, and so they are on an as-needed basis. And some of that workforce that I described outside of the essential services is working remotely per the stay-at-home order. As it relates to the county statistics, today the new numbers are out, and there's 1,930 cases in the county with 53 deaths in the county. And in Vista, we have 30 cases that have been registered to our city. As it concerns public safety, both fire and law enforcement are staffed. Everything is going fine. Many of you have asked on the fire department if they have enough supplies, and they do. We're well equipped with supplies, and the region is as well at this point in time. And one of the good things that's come out of this in the last couple of weeks since the last update is that our dispatching protocol has changed to where now both law enforcement and fire are updated if they're going to a residence or business where somebody is suspected or believed to have COVID-19, so that they can take the necessary protocols for that. In addition, our sheriff's department has been visiting the non-essential businesses, in some cases, and essential businesses, to talk to them about proper protocol. So they've been going out and educating businesses where the employees are not wearing masks, and they should be wearing masks, where customers aren't practicing the physical distancing, and where they're going to businesses that shouldn't be in operation. And so far, I'm happy to report from an educational standpoint, everything's gone fine. Our Sheriff's Department in Vista has not had to issue any citations. And so everybody is complying with the orders when they're educated on it. Next thing I want to tell you about is the senior population at the Gloria McClellan Center. In addition to lunch, the senior nutrition division is now providing dinners. So residents that would like to take advantage of this program, they can do curbside pickup, or they can go to the senior center itself and get delivery from the senior center, and we take reservations. So 3 weeks ago, when I reported to you that we were doing the delivery of meals, we had approximately 20 to 25 people taking us up on those meals. And I'm pleased to report today that we have 60 plus people on a weekly basis that are taking advantage of the meal program. So we are delivering meals on Mondays and Wednesdays, and that includes lunches for the week as well as dinners. So it's actually going very well. In addition to that, we also provide transportation for medical appointments and grocery pickups. So if anybody from the public is interested in that, they can call the Senior Center at 760-643-5288, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3:30, and they can make a reservation with the Senior Center staff. As it relates to Public Works and Recreation, as you all know, our park systems are closed currently, and we have our park directors as well as our code enforcement officers going to the different parks on a daily basis and educating, again, residents. We have a lot of residents that tend to be at the parks, but things have gone well so far in terms of the educational process, and people have been fairly well receptive of that. Talking about Public Works and kind of jumping off the COVID-19 issue, as all of you know, this past weekend, we had significant rainfall, and a lot of areas were inundated with a lot of rain. We had 3 inches in a 24-hour period, and our Public Works Department did a fantastic job patrolling the city, being at the areas that are typically temporarily flooded because of drainage and inundation of the water, and things went pretty well in the city. I'm pleased to report there was also 5 very large trees that came down, and Public Works had to go into the right-of-way, cut those trees up into smaller pieces to be able to move so that we could open the travel lanes again. So I just wanted to compliment Public Works and let you know that in the last 4 days, they've been doing an awful lot of work around the city, as well as currently filling potholes, and hopefully we'll have that completed this week. As it relates to the federal stimulus or the Federal CARES Act, the federal government allocated over $2 trillion, as all of you know. Unfortunately, the city of Vista, a city that is not over 500,000 in population, is not eligible, is not in the front of the line, or maybe any line for that matter, for direct funding from the stimulus program. The state of California was given $15.3 billion. The county of San Diego will receive $560 million. And the city of San Diego, because they're over 500,000 in size, is going to receive $238 million. And so only cities over 500,000 get that direct stimulus money. So in San Diego County, there's 17 other cities where we don't expect to have any of that money passed down from the state or the county governments in terms of a direct payment for some of our financial woes. We are still pursuing indirect payments like through FEMA for some of the expenses that we've had, but we won't be expecting any sort of payment from the federal government. For residents, starting last week, the CARES Act started providing $1,200 payments to adults and $500 for every child for those who are eligible within certain income levels. So that money started hitting the streets last week. As it relates to finances more on a local level, unemployment is expected to hit 12% on a temporary basis. And I'd like to emphasize that on a temporary basis until businesses start to reopen. The new jobless claim, as most of you know, is expected to reach 10 million. And again, hopefully that's temporary. And consumer spending has changed. It's obviously down, except for certain sectors. So we're technically in a recession. And so I mentioned last time to all of you that we have been analyzing different financial scenarios on what to do and what the impact of COVID-19 is. And at this time, we're estimating that the economy is going to start to come back. Businesses are going to start to come back in June. And That's not been said by the president. It's not been said by the governor, and it's not been said by the county health order. But at some point in time, as the curve continues to flatten, if we keep this pace, we estimate that businesses will come back by hopefully at least June. And so that's our goal. The governor had a press conference today. He mentioned that there's a number of factors that need to take place, but that if there's a decline in the number of cases and the curve flattens out, that in 2 weeks he will release what his timeline is for businesses to start opening back up. And so with this assumption, we don't think that the entire economy is going to be jump-started right away by any means, nor do we think that people are going to assimilate the way they used to. So for instance, dining, travel, large gatherings like a rock concert or the Moonlight is probably not going to be the number one spot for people to attend. It's going to take some time for people to get comfortable. We're still going to have physical distancing for a long time, more than likely. But we do think at some point businesses are going to have to start getting back to business, and we're hopeful that that's in June. We also think that it's probably, from working with our financial consultants, 3 to 4 quarters for that rebound to take place and for it to start to level off. So we do think at least for the next 15 months, there's going to be a hardship, not only at not only local government, but the business sector for a while. So we're very cognizant of that. But with that said, we're estimating reductions in a number of areas. And I wanted to kind of tell you about some of those statistics. And I'm sorry for throwing a bunch of numbers at you, but hopefully if you need any explanation, I'll be happy to provide that. So for this current fiscal year, for this remaining quarter, which is April, May, and June for the city, we're expecting sales tax to drop by 13%. We're expecting transient occupancy tax, which is our hotel tax, to drop by 25%. We're expecting charges for services to drop by 8.5%, franchise fees by 15%, senior services by 7%, cultural arts, which is the Moonlight Amphitheater, by 8.5%, the Wave Water Park by 13%, and gas tax by 25%. So it gives you some examples of the hits that are going to take place. And some of the largest ones, obviously in dollar terms, our sales tax this year, which is almost $2.5 million. For next fiscal year, meaning July through June of 2020 to 2021, we're looking at a 14% hit on sales tax. So 13% this year and 14% next year, 20% hit on hotel tax, 30% on business license. One of the things that we saw when we went through the Great Recession was that business license was hit for about 1.5 years pretty hard. And so we're estimating a 30% reduction. Property tax down by 2%, franchise fees down by about 3%, and then cultural arts and the water park 15%. And then gas tax, we think, is going to flatten out a little bit. And so we're estimating 10% for next fiscal year. And some of that has to do with the price of oil as well. So those are reductions. When you combine all those reductions up for the next 15 months, we're looking at $8.8 million. So it's a sizable amount of money for a city our size. Since 2012 and identified in the operating budget and approved by the city council, you set up a fund called the Structural Deficit Reserve. And so we've been putting money aside since 2012 in that fund. And in understanding that in the future, we're going to have a recession, we're going to have an economic downturn. It's just a matter of time. And we weren't as well prepared back in 2007 and 8. We didn't want to be in that position again. So we didn't know it was going to be a pandemic that was going to cause this, but we knew at some point there was going to be some sort of downturn. So my proposal to you is that that is the fund that we utilize to help balance our budget for that 15-month period that I described. Currently, there's $9.3 million in the structural deficit reserve. And so what I'm asking is that at this time, today, we're planning on using $8.8 million of that for its intended purpose, which is the structural deficit. And I would look to you for your direction to see if you agree with that. So with that, at this point, probably it's best to take your direction on that to see if you think that's the case. The other thing I want to mention real quick is that obviously we might have to make a change at any time. Our estimate of June might be off. Maybe if the economy comes back, starts to come back in May, well, that's a good thing. And if it doesn't come back to July, that I'm going to be back in front of you with a new operational plan. But for now, that is the intended use of the money that I would propose. And so I would like to get the council's direction at this time, if you're comfortable with that, or answer any questions that I can.
Okay, so shall I go through each one individually and get their opinion? I guess maybe we'll do it that way. I'll start. And I knew about this. Having gone through a structural deficit before, I knew that we were putting money aside, and I'm super glad that we were fiscally responsible. I just knowing that we might come across a downturn in the economy again, knowing that we were kind of putting that money aside for a structural deficit again if we came across one, because we had one several years ago. I knew about that, so I'm well aware of that fund and glad we have it. So I will start with Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to agree with and echo what you said. I wasn't on the City Council back at that time. I was a City Commissioner on the Parks and Recreation Commission. And I remember what the city went through from that perspective at that level as a City Commissioner, and watching what was happening at City Hall throughout all of our services and throughout the city with our community. And that, what happened then and what we went through then, is why we have made it a priority to increase our reserves so that we didn't suffer quite as much as we did during those times. And I'm really very, very proud of the work that we have done to increase the reserves in our city. And this is the reason why we've done that. So I want to say thank you, Mr. City Manager, for the presentation, for the information that you've given us. The details about what we did lose back in 2008, what we're predicting now with what's going on. So I appreciate the information, and I agree that this is what this fund is for. This is exactly why we did that. So I am in favor. And I don't know if you need a motion, if you're looking for a motion, but just consensus.
Yeah, I think consensus is fine.
Okay, so I agree with that very, very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Franklin.
Well, I would echo a lot of the comments. We as a council deserve a lot of credit for having planned to be in this situation. One thing in my discussions with Mr. Johnson, we've talked about, and I just want to clarify for everybody that's watching, this is a separate reserve fund from our emergency reserve fund. Patrick, can you touch on that very briefly?
Yeah, you're correct. We have an emergency reserve fund that is 31% of our budget that we have built up over time. This is separate and aside from that. It's called the Structural Deficit Reserve Fund, and it is for a moment like this.
Yeah. So I absolutely agree that this is a moment in our economy and our history where we're going to need to rely on some reserves. And I'm very proud of our city and our staff and our council for having planned to be in this situation. As soon as we recover, we're going to need to think very hard about continuing to plan to make sure that we're in a good fiscal position for the next downturn after this one. But yeah, I would absolutely agree this is the right time to utilize the Structural Reserve Fund.
Councilmember Green.
All right, so I definitely agree with all of you guys. I think that we were very fiscally responsible by saving this money, and I think now is the time to do it. A few questions that I have that I'd just like to ask about. The first one that I have is, how long did it take us to save this $9.3 million as a council?
So again, this fund started back in 2012. So
okay.
eight years we've been setting aside money of various amounts over time.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really encouraging to know that we can build up that much money for a structural deficit over that period of time. The other question that I had just kind of had to do with your presentation, and I'm assuming it has to do with the funds that we're spending right now, is you talked about our as-needed employees and how we have some employees that are working on an as-needed basis right now. If those employees were full-time employees before, are we still paying them their full-time wages, or are they paid less? How does that work?
So the way it works for our city is the full-time employees that may not have a job that they can work remotely with. They can use leave. They're still an employee of the city. Their status is fine. They can use their leave to continue to get paid. If they're not working enough hours and they're eligible for unemployment, they can file for unemployment, or they can go on leave without pay. That is one of the three options. Believe it or not, we do have some employees that frankly don't want to use any leave during this time and would rather be on leave without pay, they have the ability to do that. They've made that choice. But otherwise, people are using leave that they have. And if they don't have leave because they're a newer employee or they just don't have leave for whatever the reason might be, they are able or eligible in most cases or some cases to take advantage of unemployment.
But as a city, this money isn't supplementing their incomes by any means. Like if they're out of work, they're not making what they were making before, right?
That's correct. This money is not part of salaries for employees. This money is set aside solely for taking care of the loss in revenue that we would have. Now, ultimately, I would say to you, obviously, a large part of our budget is payroll. So money does go to payroll, but what this money is intended is to make up for the deficit in sales and in gas tax and the different funds like that. Okay,
so the two more questions is we're going to allocate the release of $8.8 million, which, it's a good amount of money. My question to you is how long are you expecting to spend that money over, and will you be reporting back to the council with, hey, this is how we allocated that $8.8 million?
Absolutely. We will, like I said earlier, $8.8 million over 15 months.
Okay.
For the last quarter of this fiscal year and the entire next fiscal year. So we would use a portion of that. It's about $4 million, a little more than $4 million for this current fiscal year that we're probably going to get hit the hardest in a short period of time. And then about another $4.5 million over the next fiscal year.
Okay, and then in the event things take a turn for the better and we make up more of that money, we obviously don't need to use all of it. I mean,
that's entirely correct. We will account. To your second point of the question, we'll account for that money. We'll have updates to you. And certainly if the economy rebounds better than we expected, we would leave that money in the structural deficit account and save it for the next rainy day.
Okay, and then the last question before I give you my approval on this, because I already approve it, is you specified that any city with a population under 500,000 has no allocation from the federal government, that the money went to the counties and it went to the big cities, but we're not expecting any money. So my question to you is, in the event we do receive money because some, act of God or whatever, and they say, hey, cities with populations of 100,000 get money, are we able to reallocate those funds to replenish this structural deficit money? Or do we need to earmark that if anything comes in, we want to replenish this fund? Or how would that happen?
Absolutely. Okay. So if we were to receive, just say $1 million from the federal government, for the sake of argument, we would look towards putting that towards this effort and not using 8.8, but 7.8 for the time being. There's a bill that's going to be brought up in the House of Representatives to deal with those cities that are under 500,000 in population. And I think the last I heard, it was an allocation of, I want to say $250 billion, which sounds like an awful lot of money, that would go across the nation to cities under 500,000. I don't know what that comes out to. I don't know how it would be divvied up if it were to even pass, but that's certainly something that's been talked about.
Okay, and I'm assuming that we'll see like a budget after this is all kind of settled in where we say, hey, this is where the shortfalls happen and this is where we're supplementing the shortfalls based off of our budgetary concerns.
Correct. You'll receive updates from me, but at the end of our fiscal year, when we true up the budget, which is October, we would show you what we're using from the structural deficit fund, what we anticipated at this point in time, or brought something new before you, and how much we actually used, so you could see what was used for the fiscal year and where we're on track for the following fiscal year.
Okay. All right. And I'm sorry, I wasn't on council all that time ago, and I just wanted to get some clarity. So I appreciate, the fiscal responsibility here and the ability to kind of make this happen and keep the city running. So thank you so much, and you have my support on what you need to make it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Contreras.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, this was a very prudent thing that the council back in 2012 did. And we're in a situation now where, it's the time to use it. So I'm 100% behind your recommendation, Patrick. And as far as the costs that the city is incurring with the COVID-19 situation, we're keeping track of all of that. So just in case we're going to be receiving some kind of emergency funding to help us out, we'll be able to easily show we spent X amount of dollars on X, Y, and Z COVID-related situation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're working with FEMA right now. We had a conference call with them earlier today to try to understand the parameters better, and hopefully we'll get some clarity on that. But yeah, our expectation is on those items, supply items, hand sanitizers, supplies, and different things like that, equipment that we might need. We would file with FEMA, and it's likely we'd get reimbursed up to 75% of that. And at this point in time, as we're trying to, so far, I think we spent about $40,000 to $45,000 on this effort. And as we try to forecast it going forward, we might get closer to 90 to 100,000 unless something else happens, or unless they open up some different parameters for which we could recoup funding. But that's what our expectation is at this point in time.
Okay. One other thing I had a question on. So when we do receive, hopefully, if we receive emergency funding to help us out here at the local level for a city, around 100,000 like ours, would the council at that point, would we have to, have a discussion about, okay, this funding is going to go into replacing this emergency reserve, or this, or is that something that the city manager just is able to do? So I'm just kind of want to see what this will look like in the future. Is this going to be a council discussion having to do with the budget, or is it just going to replenish what we used?
It's unknown at this time. If it even passes and it goes forward, and depending on the amount of money they put forward on a national level, it just depends. They may have a requirement that there's a resolution of the council. It may just mail us a check, or it may not happen. But I would tell you this: let's just say we did.
Okay.
We're not taking this $8.8 million out of this structural deficit fund today. We're going to use it to balance our budget at the end of the year, and then the remainder for next year will still be there to balance our budget for the following year. So it's not like we're taking this money out and we have to replenish it right away. We'll use it as we balance our budget in October. We'll use it as we balance our budget the following year. And if something were to change, believe me, we will, without a doubt, update you and get your input on how you want that money to flow through the city.
Awesome. And I just want to tell the public, thank you so much for taking to heart everything that we have to do on a daily basis that's different in order for us to flatten the curve. Because eventually, we want to get back to business as soon as possible, but we definitely want people to be safe, because they're the ones who are going to be creating, the economy for us. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I'm 100% behind your recommendation.
And I want to say thank you, all you. I'd be remiss if I didn't applaud your efforts, the efforts of the council in 2012 to set it up like that, and then going forward for you to continue to fund that, because that's made a huge difference for us. So thank you. All right, so we'll move on. We'll move on to business and economic development, and we're trying to do the best we can to care for our business community. And we've been working with them. And at this time, I'd ask that Kevin Ham be brought into the conversation so that he can provide an update on economic development activities going on in the city, and then resources available from other levels of government to businesses. And then we can have a discussion on that. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Actually, give me just a moment to put your PowerPoint up.
When it's time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. And good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Given the sudden and devastating impacts that have been brought on by the COVID-19 crisis, the city has developed an economic recovery plan. The specific details of this plan and our actions are as follows. We've created a shared Innovate 78 information portal for COVID-19 related items for all businesses to find information related to loans, programs, and other resources. This site is updated frequently with all the new and available resources. And by sharing this task amongst the 5 cities in the Innovate 78 partnership, we're able to reach a wider audience and update the page more often. As you may have remembered, we created the in mid-March. This continues to be updated and marketed through social media and the city's website. Right now, we're trying to work with Cox Communications and our chamber to do some additional cost-free marketing for restaurants on this website. We've created the COVID-19 business hotline, which is 760-639-6165. This hotline directs businesses to community resources and allows callers to leave a message with any question they may have. Some individuals may not have access to digital resources, so this allows for those individuals to leave us questions and gather additional information. We have created an economic recovery task force, which is also our Vista Economic Development Strategy Committee. The committee was set to start in June, but we stood that committee up early. The first meeting was held last week. The mayor and council member Contreras are on that committee, as well as 8 other individuals representing a broad swath of individuals from the business community, property owners, and workforce development. We're looking at immediate, midterm, and long-term economic development goals, and we are undertaking the effort as we speak. We are filming informational web videos that will be used to convey business-related content to inform and support the Vista business community when appropriate, and we have completed 1 video so far, and we'll do these when needed. We have undertaken company surveys in cooperation with the North County Chambers and the San Diego EDC. Both efforts have been done to better understand the needs and challenges of our local businesses and the solutions that may be beneficial for them and their employees. And this was very helpful in understanding that. The council also, at their last council meeting, eliminated the Central Vista Business Improvement District fees and rolled over the monies that we had until 2021. We're also exploring grants that are available to help augment what we're able to do. And so our staff, as well as our partners, are looking at resources that are available. We have undertaken additional regional efforts to secure grants, programs, and benefits for Vista and North County businesses in partnership with Innovate 78, the North County EDC, the San Diego EDC, the North County Chambers. These discussions are underway, and one current example is that the city of Escondido and the city of Vista have an opportunity zone. You might remember that the opportunity zone we have is right in the Paseo Santa Fe area. So we're looking at different federal funds, whether it's from the EDA, Employment Development Administration, or other areas where we might be able to bring in additional funds to market and promote the program. We have created materials to better help businesses better understand the process, locations, requirements of all of the different federal and state programs. And Kathy, if I can ask if you can put that up at this time.
Okay, give me just a second. Actually, there'll be no sound for a moment. Okay, you can go ahead and start.
Great, thank you. So the first program that's out there, and this is available on our website, it's available on Innovate 78, but I just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of what's available. The first is the Triple P program, as they call it, which is the Paycheck Protection Program under the CARES Act. Small businesses and eligible nonprofits and others with 500 or fewer employees are eligible for loans that can cover payroll, healthcare benefits, related insurance premiums, employee compensation, mortgage interest obligations, rent and utilities, interest on debt incurred. And Kathy, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Are we supposed to be seeing that?
No,
Yes.
you received it electronically. It's not showing on your screen. It's just showing for the folks watching live.
Got it.
So on the second page that is titled Paycheck Protection Program, eligible recipients for this program are eligible for up to $10 million over a 2-year period. Loan payments will be deferred for 6 months. And if you maintain your workforce, the SBA will forgive the portion of the loan proceeds that are used to cover those staffing if you remain in the program for 8 weeks. And about 75% of your funds have to go towards staffing costs. The third slide is what's called the EIDL program, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans and Loan Advance. The SBA has created this program to provide businesses with fewer than 500 employees loans of up to $2 million for a period of 30 years. In addition, small business owners are eligible to apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance of $10,000. We understand this is being given out by the number of employees folks have. So if you have 2 employees, you'll get $2,000. If you have 10 employees, you'll get $10,000. If you have 20 employees, you'll get $10,000 as well. The loan will bear an interest rate of 3.75%. However, unlike the PPP program, the Act does not provide forgiveness of the EIDL program. Businesses may receive both the PPP loan and the EIDLs just so long as they're not used for the same purpose or otherwise duplicative. I'm on a page now that says SBA Express Bridge Loans. This allows small businesses who currently have a business relationship with an SBA Express lender to access up to $25,000 with less paperwork and can be a term loan or bridge loan while applying for the EIDL program. This can give them up to $25,000. It's a fast turnaround. It will be paid in full or in part from the proceeds from the EIDL program. And it's supposed to be negotiated with regard to the amount of interest on the loan, but it's not to exceed prime plus 6.5%. I'm moving on now to the SBA debt relief slide. This is the SBA debt relief program. It provides an automatic 6-month deferral of a small business's loan with an existing lender with specifically related to a 7A SBA loan. I have heard of several businesses that have already been able to take advantage of this. It is supposed to allow for an automatic deferral of 6 months. That's something that people have been able to take care of, and many of the banks and the lenders that are working with our businesses have already implemented that for them. Looking at what California has, I'm under the California Small Business Sales Tax Deferment Plan. Small business taxpayers, those with less than $5 million in annual sales, can take advantage of a 12-month interest-free payment plan for up to $50,000 of sales tax and use tax liability. On the specific loan, no security is needed. Going to the next slide, which is the iBank, the California Infrastructure Economic Development Bank. This program was really put together for those that don't really qualify for any of the other programs. This is a program that they had in existence, and they tweaked it a little bit to make it work for this program. You can have between 1 and 750 employees. The loan can be up to 7 years. Interest rate is negotiated between the lender and the borrower, and security is needed. That is the extent of that specific presentation. Moving on to a couple of more items. Staff is conducting virtual VistaCares visits. You might remember that we go out as staff and also with the mayor and the city manager and community development director to talk to businesses to see how they're doing. To date, we've had about 150 conversations, virtual VistaCares visits with businesses to help them connected to resources, direct them to the SBA, which is helping with the PPP and specifically with the EIDL program and any of the other programs that might be out there. During these calls, we've identified trends amongst industries and organizational size. The industries that have been least affected are construction, IT, biotech, and the pharmaceutical industry. The industries, as you might imagine, that have been most effective are retail, sales, service, and hospitality. We have found that companies that have 50 or more employees seem to have fewer impacts and a low need for direct city assistance and or support due to the financial resources they have available and the depth of expertise with regard to their team members. So, for example, if they have a large staff, they might have folks on board that have the financial expertise to apply for the PPP or the EIDL program. For the mid-sized companies that are really between 20 and 49 employees, these individuals had financial reserves typically that would allow them to get through the next 60 to 90 days, or had resources available to successfully navigate through the federal loan and grant programs. The impacts that we found with these mid-sized companies were due in large part due to reduced efficiencies from moving employees from their workplace to a telecommuting arrangement, layoffs, furloughs, and a reduction in hours. The companies where we saw the most impact were those companies that had 20 or fewer employees. The impacts were due to laying off the entire workforce, losing income from sales, and having to close their doors. Although most businesses have already taken advantage of the federal stimulus program, there seemed to be difficulty amongst this group in completing these applications, so it's important to connect them to the resources that can help them do that. This is a significant need, and this is where we see a financial gap that exists. During some of these calls, we've heard points of light where companies either have increased their business or are changing their operation to meet the needs. We have companies like our 3 distilleries who have retooled their operations and are producing hand sanitizer, some of which we've been able to use here in the city. Dr. Bronner's, who produces soap and hand sanitizer, has ramped up their operations. Leica Biosystems has modified their medical devices to create a remote testing system for COVID-19. Allele Cycling Wear has started the production of masks, as well as pickpocket manufacturing. McCain Manufacturing has created a quickly assembled containment system for isolation and safety partitions. Ocean Reef and Aqualung, who manufactures PPE solutions, they have ramped up with regard to production of items for healthcare providers and emergency service workers. These are just a few of the Vista companies who are responding to the COVID crisis with ingenuity, creativity, and thoughtful actions. We continue to evaluate the opportunities that are out there to support our community through these new programs, partnership, and other activities. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Mr. Ham has reviewed some of the different loan programs that are available through the federal government. And I've heard from a few of you that you would like to discuss the possibility of Vista having a business loan program. And I would say if this is still of interest to you, I can have Mr. Ham present on some more of the particulars that would go into a loan program, what it might look like, who it might serve. But I would suggest this, that if a majority of the city council is in favor of providing direction, then we would propose that the program be structured and be as seamless as possible to get the money to the businesses. And as Mr. Ham discussed, there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to receive funding, but what we're finding is that there's a gap. There's a short-term gap in their ability once they've applied before the funds are actually doled out, so to speak. And so what we would recommend is that if the city council wants to come direction and become a city that's lending money to businesses, that it would be for approved businesses through the SBA that have already been approved. So that way we're not doing credit checks. We're not acting as true loan processors and to evaluate which businesses need it and need it the most. So that can take considerable amount of time. We know other cities that have large cities that have dedicated up to 65 employees to run their loan program that they started. And we know other cities that are working around the clock for the last 3 weeks, just processing applications, let alone no money's gone out the door yet. So if this is something that the city council is interested in, I can have Mr. Ham explain some of the criteria that we would propose from a staff level if you wanted to go down this path. So Mayor, I would leave it up to you and the city council to give us direction on that.
Well, I would like to hear Kevin, Mr. Ham. I'd like to hear what he has to say. If you want to hear that first, or do you want me to call on you each first? What do I do there? Deputy Mayor.
I want to say thank you for that report and for all that you are doing and staff is doing and the partnerships that you are working through for the people along the corridor, not just in Vista, because we are really very interconnected. I think you're doing a great job, and I want to say thank you. And I'm not opposed to hearing more information, having that come back to us about if it's something that we should get into, and if we did, what it would look like. I'm not opposed to having that report come back about the city doing a loan program. That's not a yes. That's an I'd like more information.
Did I see you waving, Councilmember Green?
Yeah, I thought you were going to go down the list. I just tried to.
I can do that. Okay, so I'll go down the list. So then second would be Councilmember Franklin.
Well, I'd like to hear the options. I've seen the cities like San Diego and Oceanside and San Marcos who are authorized programs. Many of them are in a stronger cash situation, a stronger cash position than we are. Well, we're at a time right now where we have employees who have diminished income. And I feel like our number one priority to the people we represent in Vista is to provide, obviously, for public safety, to be able to maintain staffing levels so that when people call for police and fire, that those services are available. In the last recession, we had to reduce staffing levels significantly. We had to shutter an ambulance. I'd like to see us do our utmost to utilize our reserve to continue to maintain essential services without a reduction in service. And, in the past recession, we had to ask employees to take a pay cut. I feel that it's very early and we don't yet know what all the impacts are. Our modest $9.3 million is not going to last for very long if we get into a real situation. And this could be a much more severe downturn than we yet know. We haven't seen what the real long-term unemployment impacts are going to be. The federal government's got two programs that are designed to provide immediate relief. One is directly through the SBA. One is through your local bank. Also an SBA program, the PPP. And most of the business owners that I've spoken to have applied for those programs, have not received funding yet. I would question our ability to review and provide funding faster than, the federal government. So if it's something that we can do, and we can do it in a way that is prudent and responsible, then I'd like to hear the options, because certainly I want to provide support. My genuine feeling is we're going to know in the coming months what the real gaps are. I mean, if you applied for some relief through PPP, the idea is that money should be forthcoming within about 30 days. Or at least we're going to know for a lot of these businesses how much funding they're going to receive. So, I don't know how many businesses are in a situation where, and certainly there are some, that if they don't receive funding immediately, they're going to have to lay people off, and they may even close their doors. Some of those businesses are, through inadequate planning, are not in a position with any reserves. I question, for those businesses, whether our efforts are going to make the difference. Every individual business is a case-by-case basis. One of the things about the federal programs is they're very indiscriminate. They're stimulus programs. They are designed to pump money into the economy quickly, and they do not take into account in the application processes. And I've read all the applications for these programs. They do not ask to demonstrate the financial harm. Now, every business can accurately anticipate that this is going to create a negative downturn in income, but most businesses don't really know what the true impact to the revenues is going to be. I think it would make sense for us to gather the facts, look at our own economic picture, and as long as we keep our priorities, our core services, as long as we plan to be able to adequately fund our core services, and we plan to continue the excellent fiscal prudence that we've demonstrated over the last decade that's put us in a position to not have to lay people off, to not ask people to take salary reductions, then if we can honor those priorities, then I want to also see what is in our arsenal to do to help our small businesses and put people back to work. So I definitely want the options, but I think we have to outline clearly what our priorities are. One of the things I always try and keep in perspective about our city government is the fact that we take in less than $400 per capita. The state government takes in a little less than $4,000 per capita, and the federal government takes in about $14,000 per capita per citizen. So it's important to realize the disparity in funding. Our city does not have, as the government, the same level of resources on a per citizen basis. And so we actually do an incredible amount with the small amount of resources that we have. It is important to put our revenues in a perspective and our capabilities in a perspective. It's also important to remember that we have a lower tax base than a lot of the cities in the county. We don't have any coastal areas that generate high property tax revenue. We do have a low average property tax base. And so, we really need to think about what our position is and, again, what our priorities are. But yes, I do want to see all the options. And if there's a way that we can, in a wise way, continue to provide essential services and provide some relief, then I want to do it. And don't get me wrong, though I want to review all the options, I'd like to act quickly if that's something we determine we can do. But I don't want to do it in a rush. And do something that's not in the long-term best interest of our citizens.
Jump in here and only say that the only thing I'm hearing is that it's taking a long time for the SBA loans for them to fund those, and so I would like to hear the options, but I would support a bridge loan, getting them until they get their SBA loans, and then paying our city back. Cities aren't supposed to be banks, and I don't want to spend a lot of time vetting people and whether But I know that especially smaller companies, the smaller companies, and maybe some of the mid-sized companies are having trouble getting those loans. They've applied for them and they're just not coming. So I would be interested in hearing what Mr. Hams says and what the options would be on that, but only for a bridge loan that gets paid back to the city, not for just a gift of funds, or that's where I stand. So I'll go over to Councilmember Green.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to hear everybody's input on this. I definitely would like to hear the options. I don't know that this council meeting we're going to be able to come up with any type of consensus on how we can help our business community. So my suggestion would be that we meet with the city manager, within the next week. We all kind of tell him how we, think this should look. And then perhaps at the next council meeting, that'll give Kevin enough direction to come back with, hey, this is what it would look like. Do you want to do it or not? And then we can, look into options. I've heard the same thing about the bridge loans. I think that's something that's easily approvable if we already have a written approval from the federal government that they're going to be releasing these funds, and it's going to take 30 to 45 days. If the city can release within a week, to help, and we get paid back in, 45 days or whatever, that's obviously a no-brainer bridge type of loan I think could work. But there's some other programs. I'm sure in the initial slide presentation, there were numbers of like what 10 cities had allocated based off their 100,000 population. And I just just did some quick math, and if we took away the high one and took away the low one, the average is about $400,000 that they're allocating per 100,000 for some type of loan program. And those were just cities that were listed on your grid there. I would assume when you come back, we would have a lot more. What are local cities doing? What's Oceanside? What's Escondido? I did see San Marcos. I know they allocated a ton of money, which, not looking for anywhere near that much money. But I definitely think just showing our business community that we're here for you. If we have it, we can make it happen. And I think that if we have it aspect of that is a very important aspect. And, the 8.8 million we're allocating for the, from the structural deficit fund should make sure we're not losing any of our public safety services, and we are, making sure that all of the, services that we want to keep up and running are still up and running. So that definitely has to be a priority, but a future presentation is something I'd definitely be willing to hear out and possibly move forward on.
Councilmember Conrad.
Yeah, I want to echo what my colleagues have said. I mean, obviously, cities aren't supposed to be banks, right? And so when we're running into a situation where, for 15 months, we're seeing it's going to be pretty slim for the city. So it's time for us to, be more creative, be more fiscally conservative. But at the same time, inaction will create a situation with long-lasting repercussions. And so what is the balance that our council wants to take on that? And when it comes to our corporate citizens of all sizes here in Vista, I think we definitely have to have a more thorough discussion on what's the appropriate action that our city can take to, help. I think the whole idea of a bridge loan is great, specifically because, these businesses are applying for funding because they need it immediately. And so if we can be a catalyst for that and have, a repayment agreement where we know there's money coming in and that business, can then repay the city. That's definitely something that I think as a council, we should have a discussion on. But yeah, I'd be really interested to see, a full-blown presentation on what it is exactly that we could do. And, there's probably going to be stuff on there that there won't be a full consensus on, but maybe there's something where we can craft a recovery for our local businesses. And specifically, the small ones that, we're already kind of struggling and a reduction in business and customers being able to come inside, eat, drink, whatever the case might be. It's been devastating, or there's just a loss of revenue. So I would definitely be in favor of seeing what makes sense at the city level for a city our size.
Mr. Ham has looked at what some of the other programs are in the county as well as along the state. And Councilman Green, you were referring to the chart that he put together based on some of the amounts that other cities have done. If you'd like, and he's also put some thought into parameters for what a program could look like. So if you'd like, I'd like to have him go ahead and explain that to you just to give you a feel or an understanding. And then from there, if you want to give us direction, you can give us direction, but he might be able to educate us a little more through the process. So if that sounds good, turn it over to Mr. Ham just to give a brief presentation on what he's come up with.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Valdez, can you go to the very last slide that has loans for the public's benefit? Thank you. Title program and the PPP, that it's taking folks about 2 weeks between applying for the loan and being accepted. And then from the time of getting approval and acceptance to actually receiving the funds. That's about the average time on both of those two loans. We have looked at 10 operational programs in California. And when you take out the outliers, which are the low ones and the high ones, you come up with about, for each 100,000 residents, about $498,000 per 100,000 residents. There are some additional programs under discussion, and so we will see where those go. I know a few of them will be discussed by their council in the next few weeks. Depending on the size of the fund and the amount of effort needed in the loan approval process, meaning do you want us to be loan agents? These can be time consuming and to stand up and to manage. So that's one of the things that we thought about as we went through this process. As we looked at some of the programs, we talked to Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, San Marcos, those that are considering them. There are some things that came up that we thought you might want to consider. That the fund should be distributed as gap funding between loan approval from the entity and the funding of their loan. So what we're talking about is about 2 weeks on average. Some of them could be longer. This way, the bank or the federal program is our processing evaluation, and we know that they have some need and some capacity to pay. That thereby reduces our need to do a full, complete loan review. The loan should be for no more than $10,000. The loan should be awarded as follows to companies that have up to 20 employees. So we would recommend that you consider for companies between 1 and 10 employees that they receive up to $5,000. And for companies that have between 10 and 20 employees, they receive up to $10,000. We recommend some interest rates as follows. If the loan is repaid within 120 days, no interest is charged. If it's repaid between 121 days and 1 year, 1.5% interest be charged. And if it's paid after 1 year, but no longer than 2 years, which is when all the loans would be due, they would have an interest rate charge of 3.5%. Again, loans would go to companies with no more than 20 employees. So we know they have some capacity to pay this back in addition to the approval of the federal government. We'd like to see that they have about $1.5 million in receipts or sales for the prior fiscal year. And we'd like them to provide some verifiable financials. To be eligible, they must be a Vista business or enterprise with a valid Vista business license prior to January 1st, 2020. So we know that these are companies that have been part of our community and that are here. Loan recipients must demonstrate how the funds will allow them to be operational for at least 6 months after the award of the loan, and how the funds will be beneficial for the retention and or rehiring of staff. And we would also suggest that we have a promissory note that would be executed with each loan recipient. We have talked to all the programs or most of the programs that are operational across the state. We can get the loan documents they have and modify them or any of the materials that they have for our own need, and they have volunteered that for us. That concludes my presentation.
Should I go around everybody again? Do you want to comment on that? How about I go backwards this time? Start with Deputy Mayor. I mean, not Deputy Mayor, with Councilmember Contreras. Let's go backwards. How's that?
Sure.
Make it a little exciting.
Sure. Change it up. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Ham, for that overview. I think it really does provide some of the parameters that we're discussing that we need to have in order to be responsible with the taxpayers' money. So is this, my question is, are you looking for us to accept this right now as part of the loan program, or is this, because it seems like it was outlined in some detail, or is this something that's going to come back with more detail?
Well, what
I guess that's what I'm confused on.
Our thought was, if there was a majority that wanted this program to go forward, we would provide you with some parameters tonight to get your feedback and get your input so that we can come back to you with something that you would like to see, as opposed to come back to you at the next meeting and hash out more information and then follow it up in the following meeting. It sounded like some of you wanted to provide that gap funding sooner than later. And so we thought we'd put some parameters together to get your feedback on.
And I would.
Okay.
The gap is now. The gap is right now. The gap isn't, if we come back in 2 weeks and 2 weeks, the gap is closing. Now is when they need the money. And I would just add that as a business person that did business, $5,000, I mean, isn't that much money to keep yourself going. 10,000 is better, but I'll listen. So go ahead, Councilmember Contreras. That was just my thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's why I think it's really, I think it's great that staff put this together. I know that everything's been on very short notice, and this crisis seems to be changing day to day. I like these parameters, and I think it's a good point, a good place to start helping our businesses out. So I'm looking at the list of things that I wrote down here. So you said, so there's a 6-month period, or a period of 6 months that they have to demonstrate, that the recipient would have to demonstrate that this funding would allow them to stay open for 6 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the idea is in the loan documents that they submit, we would have them present to us their notional idea of how this would really allow them to stay operational and retain or bring staff back on.
Okay. And so are we thinking that that's going to be like a standard form that we have, or is this going to be like an open-ended essay type of thing?
It'd be a standard form that we would ask folks to fill in. And then they can include a statement of how they think it's going to keep them operational and how it will bring staff on board or keep staff on board. Okay.
And let's see. Okay, and a promissory note, which is good. I have a question. So if for some reason repayment isn't happening, what's the recourse that the city is going to take or can take?
Well, I would leave that to the...
I don't know if we're going to have, a guaranteed check. I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns in talking to most of the programs that I've talked to across the state is if someone can't pay, that puts the city in the position of collections. And so that would be something that the council would have to decide. And I would ask the city attorney or the city manager how, they might think that process might work too.
I would say we have a collections effort that we use on other items in the city when people don't pay. Leave it to the city attorney if we're able to utilize a property assessed mechanism or not. But it would either be collections, take them to court, or property assessed method if we're able to use that.
We could not do this by an assessment on property. We could either use our regular collection processes or people who go out that we contract with for collection, or for $5,000, we'd be looking at small claims court.
Okay, so there's nothing like, I know in the construction industry, and I used to work in rentals for equipment. When there was non-payment, we and the GC would be paying the sub. We'd be getting kind of like a dual check type of thing, but it doesn't seem like that's something that we could set up with the SBA funding or these different funding sources. So that is definitely a piece of the pie that I think is important. Is when it comes to non-payment. What does that look like from an administrative perspective at the city level? But other than that, I think this is a good starting point, and I would be in favor of moving forward with this type of plan and it coming back to council again.
Okay, then Councilmember Green, we're going backwards.
All right. Yeah, we are. So it sounded to me like there were kind of two different programs in there. One had to do with the gap funding of the, hey, you already got a PPP loan approved and you're waiting on government funding. So we're going to, give you that right away. And the other one kind of sounded more like a loan application with periods of repayment, where if not repaid after 120 days, now you're at the 1.5% interest rate, and so on and so forth per your presentation. Are there two different types of programs you're talking about? Are the terms of repayment going to be the same for both programs, just to keep it easy?
It would be one program. We're simply talking about the term of repayment. If someone wanted to, let's say they took out $10,000 and repay it over a period of 2 years, that would carry a 3.5% interest rate. That would really give them the flexibility if they wanted to carry that out a little further. With regard to their cash flow, they could, and if they wanted to pay it within 120 days, they could do that as well. But that gap funding would help get them over the hump, but they would have a term that could be longer.
But this is saying money in addition to any other federal program. This is like another program that we would offer. Like, we're not requiring you to be approved with a federal program in order for us to possibly do this type of program.
We would, because that would allow us to take advantage of their process. So we don't have to be a loan approval agent. Okay. Yeah. Well, to me, it doesn't sound like we would be lending for that long. Then I would say, the whole idea of the gap funding is that we wouldn't be carrying any loans for 2 years. You know what I mean? We'd like to get those paid back, sooner. So that was my thing. So what this program is that we're talking about right now is strictly a gap funding program where a business is already approved for an SBA loan or the PPP loan or whatever it is. They show us that they're approved, and then we allocate the funds on the premise of repayment based off of the terms you outlined. Yes. And if they don't have that loan approved, they're not eligible for our funding. We don't have any loans for anybody if they're not already approved on through another government entity. That would be correct. Okay. And that's my thing is I'm all for the gap funding program. Don't get me wrong. I think that's great. People who are waiting on the money, it's fantastic. Have we done any, is this the only type of program the other cities are offering, or do they have another program where they're saying, hey, if you're not getting federal funding, and don't get me wrong, again, I don't necessarily want to be a bank, but maybe we have a small bridge loan, for this time, if you're not getting federal funding, up to 10 grand or up to whatever, our one-page application, whatever that is. Are we thinking about doing any program like that? Or are we this is the only one program we want to offer? This is the one we've proposed at this time. Of the 10 programs across the state, each of them do it a little bit different based upon the needs of their community and the direction from council. So some of them have forgivable loans. Some of them have grants as opposed to loans. For example, the one in South Bay that the South County EDC implements goes to restaurants, and they give them as a grant $5,000. Okay. And as the economic development director for the city of Vista, I'm assuming that you're in touch with not only the chamber, but also local businesses. So you feel that the biggest need in our business community right now is this bridge loan. There's not a lot of people who are coming to you or coming to the city saying, hey, I need a bridge loan for something that has nothing to do with feds. So I hope you understand the question. Yeah, I think that there are folks out there that are asking for money for any reason. Of course. We've looked at it. We've seen a specific need for those folks that can stay operational and can bring some staff on board. And so that's why we've kind of tailored this to that specific group of companies that have less than 20 employees that really can stay operational and move forward. Cool. And my concern is some of these mom and pop shops that may not have filed their 2019 or 2018 taxes or whatever the requirement is to get this government funding, what type of programs might be available for them if they can show, their finances and they want stuff. And maybe it's not a city program, maybe it's a county program. Maybe we can do more of an educational piece on, hey, if you don't meet the guidelines for the state and federal programs, this is another program that's available for you. Is there something like that in addition to this that we can direct our residents to that we don't necessarily have to be responsible for? There are several programs out there, I should say. So I focused really on the federal programs and the state programs because those appear to be the ones that most people are focusing on.
Okay.
But the feds also have a program under USDA. You might not think we can take advantage of that, but if we have companies that do business with agricultural concerns and they're impacted, they can take advantage of that. Verizon is working with LISC to provide funding to individuals in underserved communities. That funding opportunity will open up this week, sometime on Thursday or Friday. So I would direct people to that grant program. I understand it's going to be about $2.5 million. So there are different programs that might be available depending upon someone's ability to be financed or based upon their past finances.
Okay, and then my last question is for you. If the government does end up giving us money, I know we talked about the structural deficit money and hey, if we get an extra $1 million back, we're going to throw it towards the structural deficit. If the government comes back and says, hey, for all of you cities who gave away money to your small businesses, we're going to give you however much money, is that, I don't want to say it's going to happen, but who knows? There's so much money being thrown around. Can we have a stipulation in there? Like if the federal government gives us the money back, we're not going to take it from our businesses. Like if our debt's forgiven, their debt's forgiven type deal.
If the council wants to include a clause like that, we can change the program to fit your needs.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're taking advantage. I don't want to stop looking for free money for the city, but I want to make sure, businesses are taken care of. So as far as the gap funding program, the way you have it structured, the 1.5 interest, the 3.5 interest, I'm totally okay with that. You can bring that forward. I would like to see what other cities are doing as far as their actual loan programs. I mean, as a council and fiscal responsible council, we do have money sitting in accounts bearing a certain interest rate. What's our return on that? If we ended up doing a loan, could we get more money by working with local businesses that have a good track record of doing business? I mean, where it could benefit both of us, where, hey, we're instead of loaning it at 1.5%, I'm loaning it at 9.5% or something, where that money before was sitting in an account getting 2% on it, So I don't know. I'm a business guy, kind of. Anyway.
Part of the issue for us is we're not in the banking system. We're not in the banking system. So we are trying to craft something. If the council wants to go in this direction, we're trying to craft something that could meet your needs, but not be a problem for the city. And so what we found with some of the other cities that we've talked to, they are now becoming lending agencies, and they weren't set up for this. And the staff that they have that are receiving the applications, frankly, may not have the expertise or the background to be a lending agency. And so
what you're saying is that any city that doesn't do it as just a gap funding thing where you're not underwriting yourself, those cities are having problems with the programs they rolled out.
I don't know if they're having problems, but I would say that they're probably not going to get paid back entirely on all their loans. And they have probably a staffing issue right now while they're trying to address the hundreds and thousands of applications that they're getting and trying to prioritize what business is better suited or should be in a higher priority level.
Yeah. I would add that with regard to default rates, especially with smaller companies, and talking to agencies that focus on that market, that the default rate is much higher. And that's something to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, that's default rate was one of the things going through my mind. We're going to have to anticipate that as a cost of this program, is that a large number of these businesses won't be able to repay or repay timely. And when you do go to collections on a loan like this, typically you have to pay a pretty hefty quantity. It's typically 40 to 60, sometimes more % to the collection company when they collect. We typically don't get anything but pennies on the dollar. A couple of thoughts. One is this is being presented as something that basically, if we're going to do it, we have to authorize it right now. The idea of it coming back to the council in 2 weeks, are we 2 or 3 weeks from the next council meeting?
for 2 weeks. And the thought was that if the council wanted to do it, we'd get enough direction or at least a leaning from you tonight that we can bring back a more bona fide program to you at the next council meeting.
Yeah, and if we're going to wait 14 days before we even authorize this program, and then staff is at that point going to begin the work, we're probably going to be minimum 3 weeks before we can begin disbursements, and that's probably being overly optimistic. We'd probably be 30 days from today unless we go ahead and give authorization tonight for this. Another thought that I'm having is $5,000 or $10,000 for almost all businesses is not going to provide 6 months of operational support. I think the amount of money being suggested is inadequate to that particular parameter. So I think we'd have to be fairly loose in that parameter. Also, if we're referring to the Paycheck Protection Program as, quote, an approved SBA loan product, it's important to remember again that the PPP program is not approved based on creditworthiness. Creditworthiness is not a factor in the application. I have seen the application. I have been completely through it and read the entire thing. Again, it is a stimulus program as much as it is designed to help businesses that are in need. It is also a stimulus program designed to grant funds that will be injected into the economy. So in terms of saying that that's a creditworthiness indicator, it's simply not, because creditworthiness is not one of the factors being considered in the PPP program. That's very important that we be clear-minded on that. If we're talking about somebody who's got an SBA 7 loan, that business would have been through a creditworthiness evaluation. So I don't know if we're saying that that's going to be the requirement, but there are very few businesses who are approved because they're already doing business with the SBA. I mean, there are a number of them, but most small businesses, especially the really small businesses, aren't even at a level yet where they can borrow SBA funds. So there's just an awful lot to this that we haven't had time to think through. So frankly, it seems to me that if we do it, we've got to, and it's going to be, and we're saying time is of the essence, and it's got to be now to be helpful, then we're going to have to shoot from the hip without really having thought through all the parameters. And we really are gambling with whatever sum of money. It sounds like $400,000 is the amount being proposed, although nobody has voiced that yet. That was the average amount per 100,000 people. So if we were to use that as a starting place, $400,000, I mean, it's not a sum of money that we can't recover from a loss of some portion of. So I'm not opposed. I know businesses need help and they need it now. But yeah, the idea that we're not a bank, that this is going to consume potentially a significant amount of resources. We have a large number of businesses at 5 and 10,000 out of a $400,000 number. I think if my back of the envelope math is right, if we average that and say half of them or 5 and a half of them are $10,000 loans, you got 60 businesses potentially that we could service with these funds. I don't know how many more would be in line and would not be able to benefit. One of the thoughts I was having in terms of other ways, when is our due date for our business license tax?
It starts in September.
Okay, so it's later in the year. I'm just having a thought about maybe being creative in how we collect that and structure that. If there's, when we get there, I think it's premature now, but when we get there, we might want to think about that. And think about other city fees that are being assessed that we could perhaps provide some structuring on, particularly those fees like sewer fees and others that we're able to attach to a property. We have surety that will be paid in the future. Those might be some options that we can provide some relief in the not extremely distant future. I think the need is going to be ongoing throughout the duration of this year, at least, and likely the need is going to continue for many months beyond, as we heard from our opening presentation about what we expect. We're currently expecting a 15-month duration of a shortfall in revenue. So, if $400,000 is the number we're talking about, and under the parameters that we've discussed, I'm not opposed. I do think it's a very limited benefit. And just as long as we're all clear-eyed about the amount of staff time that's going to be required, while we're already in a situation where we're kind of running a skeleton crew right now, and everybody's trying to provide the best they can, do their job duties that are essential. So those are some of the concerns that I'm having. I think we should keep talking through this, because it sounds like, again, we need to make a decision right now if we're going to do it, if it's going to be meaningful. If it's going to come 3 weeks or a month from now, then I think we'd have more time to structure it in a responsible way. But if we take that quantity of time, then are we meeting what we're saying is the mandate to do something right now?
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to throw a little caution out there. We talk about this being a gap loan, bridge the gap from when they apply, they're approved, but they're not getting their funding. But yet we're going to give them 2 years to pay us back. Now, to me, we are not a bank. We are not a savings and loan. That is not the business that we are in. And if we are saying that the loans that the businesses apply for aren't going to be coming for, I don't remember how many weeks you said, a month or something, 2 months. I don't know what the time frame is that people can look for their money from the federal government once they put in their application. But then we're going to give them 2 years to pay us back. That's not a gap loan. That's not a bridge loan. That is us being a bank. And that's not our business. That's not what we should be doing. And there will be defaults. There will be businesses that are not going to be able to pay us back after 2 years. If we do anything, a bridge loan, I would like to see that when that money comes into them, that we get paid back right away. Otherwise, it's not a bridge loan, and you can't call it that. You have to find another name for it. And I wouldn't be in favor of doing a long-term loan like out to 2 years, because we're a city, not a bank. That's my big question with it, is the duration that we're talking about. I understand that a lot of our businesses are suffering, and I want to be helpful. I want to be a community partner. But on the other hand, we also have to be able to run our city. And we already have had conversations about the deficit that we as a city are facing. And I want to be careful that, as we know and can predict with some level of accuracy from past experience, what we might be in for over the next year, 2 years, I want to be very careful about loaning money out to businesses that may or may not be able to pay us back, and not in a timely manner. So I'm very cautious, and that's why I had prefaced my previous comment with I'm not opposed to hearing the plan, hearing a fully baked proposal. I'm just not sure that I'm going to be in favor of it, but I want to hear what you would come back to us with. But I think that we really need to be very careful with what we do right now at this time. And I know that Councilman Franklin had brought up business license taxes. I brought that up with the city manager a couple of weeks ago, or last week, when we were talking. And that is something that, in order to help some of these businesses that are going to come back, I know some businesses are not going to make it through this, they're not going to reopen, but the ones that do reopen, and when we do put out our business license renewal notices, I don't know what in that context we can do to help our businesses, whether it's reduction in the percentage, or if it's a longer period of time to pay it or to pay it in installments. That is something as a city, I think it is within our purview and something that we can look at to be proactive in helping our businesses. Gap loan, I'm not particularly opposed to a gap loan, but it would have to be the gap loan, the bridge loan to get repaid when they get their monies. So I just have quite a few concerns. I think we need to be very cautious. We've worked very, very, very hard to come up over the last few years. We've made some very hard decisions as a council to make sure that we have enough funding in our reserves to do what we need to do as a city. I would be very wary to have to go into this future with some uncertainty, not only doing business as a city, but also trying to do business as a bank. So I just want to put that out there as a little bit of caution to everybody. But I do look forward to what your report would say in depth when you come back, I guess in 2 weeks. We'll talk about it again.
And Councilwoman Rigby, the duration or the term, we were looking at typically what other cities have done with their loan programs. And for the most part, they're 2 years. But if the council was so inclined, we could make it a year or a different term.
I appreciate that. I'm just thinking that takes us so far away from being just a gap between their application to the federal government and getting their federal loan or their federal payment. That's not a gap for me. That's us lending, and then we have to go and, chase down people in 2 years or a year that aren't going to be able to pay it back, or that money wasn't as helpful as we hoped it would be, and they ended up going out of business anyways. So I just think, what we're talking about isn't a gap or a bridge loan. What we're talking about is just a loan, and it needs to be fully baked either way. So I look forward to it coming back. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I would say if we bring it back, if we come back in 2 weeks, I don't know. Is that too late to even help people? I mean, I'm here, so I've been talking to businesses out there, and I hear now they're looking for money now, and actually some of the SBA money they said has run out, or they don't know if they're going to give it. So I just was trying to help. I was just looking for a gap to get them over the next few weeks, So, but if we're going to come back in 2 weeks and then look at it again and bring it back, I agree with Councilmember Franklin. It's like it's not a gap funding; it's something else. So I don't know. You guys, whatever you guys want to do. So.
Mayor, just adding a little bit of clarity to the gap there is that you're right. Many of the programs, the banks, whether it's the PPP, have hit some of them have hit their capacity. And it seems that between the approval or the submittal of the application and the approval, that's about 2 weeks. So most of the programs seem like they've already hit capacity. And so it sounds like in about 2 weeks, many of these folks might start receiving some of their funds.
So, yeah, so then I say, then what's the point in doing it? So I see Councilmember Green waving at me. Councilmember Green.
So this is my thing is I don't think it makes sense to go back a couple weeks and look at another program too, but I do completely agree with Deputy Mayor Rigby, and that's kind of why I was confused and why it sounded like two different programs is because we had this whole interest rate thing and stuff set up. I think something that I would be supportive of right now that possibly the majority of my council would be is a true gap funding or bridge loan type program where we only offer a 6-month repayment, and if you don't pay back within 6 months, we meet, maybe in 90 days or 120 days. I mean, I think that the period should be very short, and it should be like if we're not paid back within that period of time, we immediately go to collection. I don't want to start interest-bearing accounts and, trying to collect additional interest on top of base loan amounts given. If they can truly provide documentation saying, hey, my loan's approved and I'm expecting money in the next 30 to 45 days, us saying, hey, we'll give you a 120-day interest-free loan, and you pay it back by this date, should be totally acceptable to them. We shouldn't have to give them 2 years. And that's where I think Deputy Mayor Rigby was saying is if you give somebody 2 years to pay back, they're going to take the full 2 years to pay you back. I do not want to give anybody that kind of time. I want it to be, if it's really a bridge loan based off of just them getting approved, it should be very quick money out and very quick money back in. That's my take.
I see. Councilmember Franklin, did I get you?
Yeah, businesses who have applied for PPP, most of them have received, if they've received anything from their bank, it's a confirmation of receipt of the application. I'm talking daily to a half dozen business owners who've applied. It's my belief that the quantity of time from you being told you're approved to the time you actually get the disbursement is a very short period of time. The greatest deal of waiting is occurring in the processing and in the underwriting, or not underwriting, but approval of the PPP application. So in a way, we don't know who has applied for PPP is going to be approved and receive the funds. So if we're giving it as a bridge measure to people who have applied, Bank of America inside of about 7 days had $35 billion in applications on this program. There were only $359 billion approved by Congress. So Bank of America alone represented 10% of all of the funds available. And then Wells Fargo immediately, blew through their $10 billion allocation. I mean, I guess what I'm telling you is the folks who applied in the first few days are likely to get something. The reason Congress is talking about going back for another lump sum on PPP is that probably within 1 week, all the businesses, because it's first come, first serve, all the businesses that are going to receive funding had already applied. So at this point, there's a lot of people applying that are likely not to receive funds. And I would submit it's darn near impossible for us to know who's going to get money and who's not. So if we're giving the money as a bridge to the receipt of the PPP money, then there's going to be a lot of businesses who've applied that don't get funding. And, you are going to have to make a provision for they didn't get the funding, but we issued a bridge loan to them. And now you're going to have to give them some amount of time back because we assume they've used that money to pay their employees. And so now they're going to need some time for repayment. And now you are going to be in a situation where default rates are going to be higher. So I just don't think we have sufficient information. I'm pretty familiar with what's to be known, and there's very little information out there. So we're really flying in the dark here.
Okay, so anybody else? Councilman Contreras, did you want to talk? You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I mean, these are really good questions, right? I mean, people need help right now. Small businesses especially need help right now. I mean, even just trying to keep up with buying enough products to keep everything sanitized, right? Like that's a additional expense right there that they didn't have before. Making sure that for the businesses that, employees have to have PPE, that they're able to get that. I mean, so there's so much that businesses are having to do right now. And so I think we do need to have a little bit of a sense of urgency in providing some help with the anticipation that this could possibly be a first step. Hopefully, economic recovery happens quickly. But if it doesn't, and this is echoing, down for a year, one of the things I don't want to do is prematurely put, all these funds on the table without being able to get any of that back, and then be in a situation where the economic environment is worse, and what do we do at that point? So, but we definitely have to do something as soon as possible. And I definitely I appreciate Deputy Mayor Rigby, the points that you brought up about the bridge and the duration of time. I don't think we can get past the fact that we're going to probably lose money on some of these. On others, it's a return on investment. We want to try and keep, we already are going to have a decrease in sales tax. And so what can we do as a council to, this is so far out of what ordinarily we would do, right, as a council, but I think we have to rise to the occasion. So is there something on this list, a few items on the list that Mr. Ham provided us that we could say, hey, you know what, let's start moving forward with that. Because I do think that we need to do something immediately. We're already far into the economic crisis that COVID-19 has spurred. So I don't know. It's going to be difficult to hash something out where we have all the answers, and because we're not a bank, so it's not like we're going to be creating all these different contracts and whatnot. But I really think that we should do something immediately. Maybe it's that we don't allocate a full $400,000. Maybe we allocate a smaller amount as a trial basis over the next month, and then as we're getting updates, we can expand the program. We can take a look at if we need to do like a second phase. I don't know, but I think we definitely have to do something now. So hopefully we can give there's some kind of consensus where at least some of these items on the list, we say, you know what, okay, this is a good parameter. This is a good parameter. And we can get something going, because time is of the essence right now. So those are my comments.
So do we have someone that would want to put those parameters out there as a motion? Oh, our attorney wants to.
Presentation.
Sure, you want to put parameters out there for us?
This is a great discussion, but the Brown Act will require you to place this on an agenda. Now, that could either be in 2 weeks at your regular meeting, or if something can be pulled together, it could be a special meeting, but you're not going to be able to take any substantive action tonight beyond discussion.
Okay. So
we're going to have to wait regardless.
So then should we direct our city manager to come back, or Mr. Ham to come back with a proposal for us? They've heard a lot. I don't know. What do you guys, anybody have a thought on it? Okay, Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, I would ask that a proposal be brought back, but I go further. I know that Mr. Ham and the Economic Development Department have been on the phone to a lot of our businesses. I'd like to reach out to a number of businesses between now and the next council meeting and ascertain, would this really help you? Is this something you would consider applying for? And I'd like to get all of our ducks in a row, since we legally can't do it tonight. I'd like to get our ducks in a row in terms of exactly what does approved for an SBA loan mean? Does that include PPP, or does it an SBA 7? If we get some of those details and we have a chance to talk to some business owners, find out, if this is something that would really address a need, then I think that would give us the ability to make a much more informed decision in 2 weeks.
Or even if we needed a special meeting in a week, we could come back next week and have another, just a special meeting with just that discussion, possibly. Councilmember Contreras, did you want to say? When I see the next light up, I always think you want to talk.
I was agreeing with what you said. I was agreeing with what you said. I mean, worst case scenario, we can have a special meeting. I actually don't have any issues with any of the parameters set forth. I do want some additional information. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Anybody else? With that, Patrick, do you have enough information to
I think we do.
come back for it with us? Okay, so
Thank you.
we have all that.
So before we leave this item, I do want to say thank you to the council for your patience, understanding during this time. And it's great to see how the residents and the businesses, government, public safety, healthcare providers have come together for the betterment of our community. And I believe there is one person that submitted a communications on the presentation item that Ms. Valdez would like to.
That's correct. Thank you. We received a voice message from Sue Makarchuk, and she asked that the City Council do not rush into restarting the business community, that you do research to make sure it is safe for everyone, rich and poor, and you make good decisions for everyone that lives in Vista. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, shall we move on with our meeting? And go to the consent calendar. And so the recommendations on the following consent calendar will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar. Any member of the public can remove an item by making a request to the clerk secretary at publiccomments@cityofvista.com. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered immediately following the adoption of the calendar. And we have 11 consent items this evening. So do I have any requests to remove from the public? Remove an item?
None from the public.
None from the public. Would any of the council members want to remove an item? Councilmember Franklin?
I was just going to offer a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, do I have a second? Council Deputy Mayor?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So then we'll have a roll call vote.
Thank you. If you please respond with your vote when I call your name. Deputy Mayor, or I'm sorry, Mayor Ritter.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Councilmember Green. And Councilmember Contreras.
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Okay, with that, we will move on to our public hearings. There are 3 public hearings this evening. If there are no speakers, do the council want to report? Or do you just want to, or are there, ask this first, are there any speakers for this first public hearing? Public hearing is open. So
We don't have any speakers yet, but we did want to take a short recess to see if we receive any.
Oh, so are we going to take a recess right now?
Yes, unless you wanted the presentation first.
Do you want a presentation before we go to recess?
If we're going to take a recess, we might as well hear the presentation to fill the time.
Yeah.
Do we need to, if we have the presentation, then do we also have to have a recess in addition?
Mayor, the answer is yes. The object of the recess is to allow a member of the public to react to the presentation if there is one. Otherwise, give them a couple of minutes to react to the written materials, which were part of the agenda and available to them. Then if we have no comments, the council can then move to discussion or its vote.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to, do you want to report? I need to have some, yes, Councilman Franklin.
Because we've all received the written materials and the public can review the content of these hearings online, I would suggest we dispense with the reports.
Okay, and then we'll pause for public comment.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and put the recess up, and we're going to mute everybody, and then we'll let you know when to come back on.
Maybe they go away.
All right, we're about ready to start again. If we could get everyone back on, Chris is going to put you back on.
Can people see us when we're on break?
So they can hear you now, but they can't see you. We have a recess sign up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that. We're going to put you back on. Do we have everybody back on? Yes. So we'll go ahead and you can call us back, the meeting back to order.
Okay. And how long does the recess usually last?
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Okay. Oh, so I forgot where we left off. As for public comment. Okay. So
I'm waving at you, Joe.
We all back? Okay, so we're now back. We're back in session. The opportunity to provide public comment on this item is now closed. The city clerk Valdez, please share the public comments received.
We did not receive any public comments on this item.
Okay, so Deputy Mayor, do you have any comments or questions?
I do not, Madam Mayor, but I would like to move that we close the public hearing and approve staff's recommendation as it's presented.
Councilmember Franklin, do you have any comments or questions?
I'd second the motion.
Councilmember Green, comments or questions? Councilmember Contreras, questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion by Deputy Mayor Rigby and a second by Councilmember Franklin. So City Clerk Valdez, please give us the roll call vote.
All right, please respond with your vote when I call your name. Mayor Ritter?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rigby?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Aye.
Councilmember Green? Councilmember Contreras?
Aye.
That item passes unanimously.
Okay, the second item is another public hearing. It's to receive public testimony regarding sewer easement vacation way in Watson Way. Public hearing is now open. Community Development Director John Conley will provide a staff report if you want a staff report. Would you like a staff report on this? No. Nobody? No? Okay, so then let's see. Then let's see, where do we go here? So we're going to take a short recess.
Another quick recess.
Another quick recess. So 3 minutes, everybody.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and unmute everyone. So give us just a moment to do that, and I'll let you know when we're ready to put you back on. There, you could go ahead and start.
Okay, we are now back in session. The opportunity to provide public comment on this item is now closed. City Clerk Valdez, please share the public comments you received.
We've not received any public comment on this item.
Okay, Councilmember Franklin, do you have any questions or comments?
We close the public hearing and adopt the motion as proposed by staff.
Okay, Councilmember Green,
I'll second that.
do you have any comments or questions?
No.
Councilmember Contreras, questions or
Nope.
Deputy Mayor Rigby?
I have none, Mayor.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Franklin, a second by Councilmember Green. City Clerk Valdez, please conduct our roll call vote.
Please state your vote when I call your name. I keep doing that. Mayor Ritter.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
And Councilmember Contreras.
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Okay, so that takes us to public hearing number 3. The final public hearing is to consider an update to the sewer capacity charge. So the public hearing is now open, and we probably should maybe hear a report on this. And Senior Engineer Alfred Pedroza will be providing the staff report.
Great. Give us just a moment to bring him in and get the PowerPoint up for those viewing at home. Okay, and if we could put Mr. Pedroza on, please. Are you with us, Alfred? Hold on.
There he is.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Go ahead and start, Ms. Pedroza.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Again, my name is Alfred Pedroza. I'm a senior engineer in the engineering department. For your consideration is a resolution updating the sewer capacity charge for new connections to both the City of Vista and Buena Sanitation District. Slide 2, please. So the sewer capacity charge is a one-time charge assessed against new development that recovers a proportional share of capital facilities cost that was constructed or will be constructed to benefit the property. The sewer capacity charge should not exceed the estimated reasonable costs of providing the sewer facilities to new customers and should be of proportional benefit to the property being charged. Slide 3, please. So the city hired Raftalis to conduct a sewer capacity charge update study. The methodology that was used is the equity buy-in approach. The city and board approved this approach in 2004, and we have been using it since then. The approach is appropriate for agencies that have capacity in their sewer systems and are close to being built out, which is the case with our sewer facilities. Under this approach, new sewer connections are charged an amount equal to the net investment already made by existing users of the system. This also allows new connections to buy into the system and have a financial position that is on par with existing customers. The method focuses on total value and capacity of the existing system. To get the total value, we look at the replacement cost of the system in today's dollars minus depreciation. The original value of the system is indexed with engineered news record. It looks at reserve balances available to the system, and it subtracts any outstanding debts. Finally, we take the current connections to the system to come up with a value per equivalent dwelling unit. Slide 4, please. So the net value of the Vista sewer system, including its share at Encina Wastewater Authority, is $164 million. The number of equivalent dwelling units at the time of the study is 30,839. Connections are categorized by their type of use. So a single family residential is counted as one dwelling unit. For commercial properties, an equivalent amount of units are calculated based on the amount and type of usage. So we take the net system value and divide it by the number of EDUs to arrive at the dollars per EDU. Using this calculation, we arrive at $5,327 per equivalent dwelling unit. Next slide, please. So it's the same approach with the Buena Sanitation District. The value of the Buena system, including its share of Encino Wastewater Authority, is $89 million. The number of equivalent dwelling units at the time of this study is 13,958. So then we get a charge per equivalent dwelling unit. It comes to $6,405. Next slide. So to recap, here are the current capacity charges, the proposed recommended capacity charges, and the dollar and percent difference for each. For the city of Vista, the current capacity charge is $4,797. The proposed capacity charge, like I mentioned, is $5,327. This is a difference of $530 or 11%. For Buena Sanitation District, the current capacity charge is $6,143. The proposed capacity charge is $6,405. This is a difference of $262, giving us a difference of 4.3%. Next slide, please. So the charges will be collected and placed in a distinct capital facilities fund. The fund can only be used for capital improvement projects. The funds cannot be used for staff time or for O&M activities. We recommend the proposed charges be effective January 1st of 2021. We also recommend the charges continue to be adjusted per the Engineer News Record Construction Cost Index every fiscal year. Slide 8, please. So on this slide, we have a graph showing the regional comparison of sewer capacity charges among our neighboring agencies along the 78 freeway. Each agency is a different sewer system with their own value and number and types of connections. So we have here on the chart, City of Carlsbad, Vista, Buena Sanitation District, Escondido, Oceanside, and Vallecillos Water District. Vista and Buena are both shown with their respective current and proposed charges side by side. Carlsbad is sitting at $4,737. We are proposing $5,327 for Vista, $6,405 for Buena Sanitation District. Escondido is at $7,500. Oceanside is at $7,794, and Vallecillos is at $12,986 for their capacity charge. So next slide, please. Staff recommends adopting resolutions establishing the sewer capacity charges on January 1st, 2021 at $5,327 per equivalent dwelling unit in the city of Vista and $6,405 per equivalent dwelling unit in Buena Sanitation District. Staff is available with any question you may have on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, our city clerk is going to allow a short recess for public comment, right?
Yes, we can do that now if you like.
So we're going to have a recess for public comment.
Madam,
3 minutes, right?
Hold on a second, Mayor.
Oh, okay, Sarah. Yes, City Attorney Piper.
if there are any questions for staff and back and forth with staff, it would be best to have them now. Then when that is concluded, we would have our recess, and then only the council would debate after that without any further input from staff.
Oh, okay. Well, then I will go. We'll start with Councilmember Green this time. Do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, if you could give me just a second to get you back. Okay.
Okay. So now we're actually going to go comments or questions on this first. So, Councilmember Green, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. When was the last time that we increased this fee?
We had a increase back in 2015. Every fiscal year, we do increase the capacity charge per the engineering news record. So the last increase was in July, but the last time we took this to council was back in 2015.
Okay, my question is kind of on the percentage of the increase, because it's an 11% increase based off of the previous, I guess, fiscal year. I mean, my thing is the 11% a difference from 2015 to now, or is the 11% an increase from 2019 to 2020?
It's from 2019 to 2021.
Okay. And then my next question for you is going to be, what do you anticipate the increase will be in the coming fiscal year? And is it common to have this large of a percentage increase? It seems like a pretty large percentage.
To answer your first question, I'd like to actually bring in Sanjay if we could. He might be able to answer some questions. He is from Raftelis. He is the consultant that supported the city on this study.
Good evening, Mayor and public. This is Sanjay Gar. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there was a couple of questions that was asked. The first is the increase, and why was the increase so much more than we would anticipate, 11%? And the reason for that was because of the increase in the value of the system. The city has done a great job in maintaining the assets. They have done a significant amount of repair and replacement in the last few years, as you may be aware of, and that is now reflected in the value of the system. So you've done a great job maintaining that system, making sure it is well taken care of, and now that is reflected in this new fee that we're looking at. In the future, the fee will be based on the ENR index. That index we anticipate to increase by 2%. Now, there's some challenges here. Earlier on, you talked about some of the financial situations that we're facing as a nation and within the city of Vista. So there's some uncertainty about that and what's going to happen in the future. But historically, it has increased about 2 to 3% a year.
Okay, and that was I was wondering, is you talked about the methodology used to increase by 11%, and you talked about the value of the existing system divided by the demand equals the buy-in cost. So when I look at that, I mean, I get it. I've spent a lot of time with Elmer Alex with his sewer presentations. Thank you so much, Elmer. And I know we put a lot of money into the system. So it makes sense that it's worth a lot more now than it was last year, because we did allocate a lot of money for it. I just wanted to make sure that the developers coming in, building in our city, know that they don't have to anticipate a 10% increase in fees every year. This is something that we dumped a bunch of money into the system, therefore this is a bigger jump. Typically, if I'm not mistaken, this increase is more in line with like the cost of living increases, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Sanjay. Hey, thank you so much for the information. I really appreciate it. Those were my only questions in regards to this. And thank you so much for the presentation, Alfred. I really appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Contreras. Do you have any questions or comments?
I don't. Thank you so much for the report.
Okay, how about Deputy Mayor Rigby?
Just have one question. I appreciate your answer to the last one. And this is just a question of curiosity. Vallecito's Water District is $12,986, which is significantly higher than anyone else in the region. Do we know why? I mean, is their system that much better than everybody else's?
I'm going to border on speculation now, so my apologies on that. But I suspect Vallecito's might be doing what we call an incremental, where they're looking at new infrastructure. The approach that Alfred mentioned was an equity buy-in, where we're looking at the current assets. You don't need to develop any new projects for growth. While I suspect Vallecito's may have some projects that are for new capital projects that are specifically growth related.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that customers of the Buena Sanitation District have seen a reduction, I believe last year and this year, for 2 fiscal years in sewer rates. And I think we held the sewer rates flat in the Vista Sewer District. So through really excellent management on behalf of our engineering department and our city management, we've actually had a situation where we've been able to bring our maintenance and infrastructure upgrades fully up to par and really have a modern system that has no deferred maintenance, and at the same time reduce our reserves and return funds to ratepayers. So we've done a really great job of managing the system. One of the slight downsides to that is we have disgorged our reserves, and these, as we studied here, these costs are to recover actual costs. And as we've improved the value of our system because of our investments, it's created a slight increase for new customers connecting. But all in all, we're really in a great position and have kept rates low or lowered them. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done with our sewer systems.
Okay, so then let's see. For that, we're gonna now we're gonna take a short recess to allow for public comment to be received. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we'll go ahead and put everyone on mute. So we'll come back in 3 minutes.
Okay, see everybody soon.
Okay, we're about ready to start, so we're going to bring everyone back in and we'll be live. Actually, we'll wait for the mayor. Hold on. All right, Mayor, we're ready to start again.
Session. The opportunity to provide public comment on this item is now closed. City Clerk Valdez, please share the public comments you received.
We did not receive any public comment on this item.
Okay, then if nobody has any comments, I would like to have a motion and a second. See some hands raised or something.
So moved.
Franklin?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Franklin and a second by Deputy Mayor Rigby.
And the motion includes closing the public hearing, correct?
Yes, it does,
Yes,
and approving
yeah.
the resolution drafted by staff.
Okay, so Clerk Valdez, please conduct our roll call vote.
State your vote when I call your name. Mayor Ritter,
Yes?
Deputy Mayor Rigby,
Aye.
Councilmember Franklin,
Aye.
Councilmember Green,
Aye.
Councilmember Contreras.
Aye.
That item passes unanimously.
Okay, that takes us to our discussion items, and we have one discussion item this evening. Is D1. It's a temporary eviction moratorium, and Councilmember Contreras requested this item be put on the agenda, so I'm going to ask her to introduce the item.
Sure. Thank you so much. So you can read the title of it, an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the Chartered City of Vista, California, enacting a temporary moratorium on evictions due to a non-payment of rent for residential and commercial tenants, where the failure to pay rent results from income loss from the novel coronavirus COVID-19 and triggering the suspension of foreclosure remedies that could lead to an eviction under similar circumstances pursuant to Executive Order N-28-20 from our governor. Thank you so much to all my colleagues for all the discussions that we've had addressing the current situation that we're in. I want to start first by saying that we worked so hard on a plan to address homelessness. And now all of a sudden we're in a situation that no one anticipated, where individuals in our community and across the United States have lost significant income, where the hardships that people once had are that much more. We live in a city where we do have a significant part of our population that is in a hardship on any ordinary day, right? When we look at the statistics and we look at the different cities in our county, Vista has a deep pocket of poverty. And so while, some of us are really fortunate, we have healthcare, we have a stable paycheck coming in, that isn't the norm. And so what are we going to do as a city to ensure that we are providing ample tools to our residents and to our businesses for them to be able to make it through this situation that we're in with COVID-19? And even though at the state level, we have some protections, there have been several cities at this point who have outlined in depth some additional measures. And so we're seeing ordinances pretty much go
through as a unanimous 5-0 vote in a lot of cities. And I think the reason is that we really can't anticipate the severity of what the situation is going to look for our residents in the next few months. We all hope that with the measures that we're taking and the discussion that we had today, even in addressing our businesses, we can all hope that these measures that we're taking are going to keep Vista resilient. And we've done a really good job so far. Our population has stepped up to this challenge. So I do believe that in the type of city that we have, with the type of population that we have, there are certain measures that I think we need to take and at least have a discussion about. For example, this ordinance is in no way telling tenants that they are not going to pay. The situation is that people are going to pay, right? And those who can't, it's going to be unfortunate. What we can do at the city level is we can provide an additional cushion of time to extend the period that regular folks, trying to get back to work, trying to make up the loss of income that they have, so that those folks can have the ability to keep a roof over their heads, to keep their loved ones housed, and to be able to transition back to employment, back to a situation where they have the income necessary to stay housed. So, for example, I hope that everybody read the moratorium in detail, but one of the issues that we have at this point is rent due on the 1st of April. Here we are about mid-month, and I know a lot of people are really confused. We have a language barrier as well, and so the information that people need has slowly been trickling. Now, with this ordinance, what we can do, we can provide 6 months. We can provide a framework that allows for 6 months of repayment from the time that our city decides to lift the local emergency. We can let the tenants know you have to provide your landlord documentation that shows a loss of income due to COVID-19, but you have 30 days to do it. Because at this point, the 7 days that is outlined at the state level, it's not enough. It's not enough for the demographics of our city. It's not enough for the type of population that we have. We need a little bit more time. So with that said, I really want to make sure that all the work that we did, all those council meetings, all the public input that we had when it came to looking at keeping people housed and getting people housed here in Vista, that we're not in a situation right now where we're going to be seeing a lot of individuals fall through the cracks. So I just want to build upon some of the work that the council has done just to show our residents and our businesses that need a little bit additional cushion, that the city is here to provide that additional help. It does not mean that you don't get to pay. There has to be payment. We have to make sure that people are made whole. But with that said, we also have to provide individuals the ability to make themselves whole. And with that, I think that an ordinance where we're showing the public this is a temporary eviction moratorium that gives a little bit more for our residents than the state. Because I know I've been seen a lot of council meetings, and I've been a part of a lot of council meetings where, we talk about how the state doesn't do enough or doesn't necessarily outline the best policy. But here we are in a situation where our city can take control because of this pandemic, where the city can take control and say, listen, we are providing our citizens, our businesses, with a little bit more opportunity to make themselves whole and keep our economy going. Because the last thing we need to do is move forward like it's business as usual and run into a situation where a lot of people in our community don't know how to keep a roof over their heads. So I know that there's a lot of comments that have come in from the public regarding this topic. So I definitely want to hear from the public. I want to hear from my colleagues. And I hope that by the end of this discussion, we can move something forward unanimously, like so many other cities have done, because I think our residents deserve that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead just to have it on the table. I'm going to make a motion to approve the temporary eviction moratorium ordinance. But I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues and to the public. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think right now we're going to go take a short recess. Am I correct, Kathy? A short recess to allow for public comment to be received?
Yeah, actually, ask Attorney Piper if that's okay, or if you want them to continue with discussion first. Sorry, we have to unmute you.
I've got it. Now would be an appropriate time. There is no further staff presentation, if you will. So any public comment should precede the council discussion.
Okay.
So we should discuss it first then?
No. Now is the appropriate time for the comment to come in, if there is any beyond that which we've already received.
Okay, so we need to take a short recess then again, right?
Yes.
We'll be back in 3 minutes, everyone?
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if we could have everyone join again, we're going to start in just a moment. Are you ready? We go ahead and start now, Mayor. Mayor, if you can hear us, we could go ahead and start now. Okay, we could go ahead and start now, Mayor.
Okay. Oh, my computer went. I went away. I think it was looking for me. Okay. We're now back in session. The opportunity to provide public comment on this item is now closed. City Clerk Kathy Valdez, please share the public comments received.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilmember Contreras indicated, we received quite a bit of public comment on this. It was all made available to you with the exception of one email that came in after 4. And voice messages were also summarized. So that was available on the website for other folks as well. I'm going to read those comments that we've been asked to read out loud at the meeting. So the first is from Cipriano Vargas. Dear Mayor Ritter and council members, I'm emailing you today in support of item D1, temporary eviction moratorium. I live in District 1, but also serve as a school board member in Vista Unified. As you know, 62% of our students come from low socioeconomic status. Many of our families whom are renters are impacted at a higher rate for food and home insecurity. In this time of crisis, it is with hope that local government can help bridge the gap. There are measures in this policy to ensure transparency and accountability. Please follow the leadership of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors, the City of San Marcos City Council, and many others across the state. As a school district, we are doing our best to help continue to feed our students and provide connectivity for distance learning. While I wish we could do more, some things are out of our control. But what is in your local control is this policy that sits before you. I urge you to vote yes on this. Thank you for your time. Vista USD is in this together. Join us. The next is from Sarah Spinks. Dear Mayor Ritter and council members, I'm emailing you this evening in support of item D1, temporary eviction moratorium. I live in District 1 and am involved in a number of community organizations, including an arts organization which serves individuals who are college students in their early 20s and primarily renting. I know you recognize artists can fall into lower economic socio-demographics, hence the city's partnership with the Community Housing Works Development on Paseo Santa Fe, which will serve to provide affordable housing to artists, as well as veterans and locals. Personally, many of my peers are renters, parents of children in our community, out of work and uncertain about the future. I urge you to vote yes on this. As leaders, it is your purview to support state legislative action that aims to protect public health and property. Establishing this ordinance as an urgency ordinance is necessary based on the reality of the situation, as it is still uncertain how long this might go on for, and what the total impact, economic and health-wise, might be. Thank you for your leadership and putting this item on the agenda for discussion, consideration, and hopefully a unanimous yes vote. The next is from Katie Melendez. Dear Vista Mayor and City Council, I am a lifelong Vista resident and a renter. I am also a social worker and serve those experiencing housing insecurity in our community. I urge you to vote yes on discussion item number 1 regarding the temporary eviction moratorium. This temporary eviction moratorium is both compassionate and practical. Many families are impacted by COVID-19, from those who are ill to those taking care of vulnerable family members. Many are impacted financially and have lost wages due to COVID-19. We all want to do our part, honor the stay-at-home order, and keep our families safe. But with May rent just around the corner, it seems that many of us can't make ends meet. What are Vista families supposed to do? As you may know, state and county eviction moratoriums are not sufficient. Tenants need more time to communicate with their landlord in order to be fully protected. The City of Vista can advocate for renters by giving them 30 days to notify their landlord about their inability to pay rent. This could allow more people to be protected, as many in our community have already missed the statewide 7-day deadline. Also, by voting yes, the renters will have 6 months to pay back unpaid rent. Allowing adequate time to pay rent back is only reasonable after widespread uncontrollable job loss and financial instability. This is more than lip service or symbolic. This ordinance will give real families a fighting chance to survive this pandemic. Our community thanks you for voting yes on D1. The next is from Martha Alvarado. Dear Mayor Ritter and council members, I'm writing today to support resolution D1 titled Temporary Eviction Moratorium. As a Vista Unified School Board member, I know that many of our VSU families are suffering right now. This pandemic has caused enormous amount of anguish and stress on everyone, but especially our community members who are economically disadvantaged. As you know, over 60% of VUSD students come from homes that are low socioeconomic status. Many of their parents have lost their jobs or have been laid off. As such, VUSD has given out over 67,000 meals since the beginning of this health crisis and has provided devices, hotspots to close the digital divide. These families need our help collectively. Because of job losses, many VUSD families are having to choose right now whether to buy groceries and medicines or pay their rent. Today, I'm asking the City of Vista to join VUSD to help our most vulnerable students and families. As you know, the County of San Diego and other cities in North County have already passed a temporary eviction moratorium. Today, I'm asking all of you to do the same. Thank you for your consideration. My name is Angelina Cruz. I'm a leader in Poder Popular, and I lived in Vista for 18 years. To pass this motion, it would mean a great relief for many of the families in Vista. My family hasn't been immensely affected or lost employment because of COVID-19, but there are other people in my neighborhood that have lost a lot of work opportunities, and the majority don't have any money to pay bills, and all of them are renters. We have heard of cases of families being threatened to be evicted in nearby apartments. This is scary and dangerous, and this moratorium would serve to protect families. Thank you. I am Betty Resendez. I'm a leader in Poder Popular and have lived in Vista for 26 years. I am in absolute support of this moratorium. Since there's no work, no job opportunities, and no employment for the majority, there are no wages, meaning no money to pay bills. This would help alleviate families, and I support this moratorium and encourage our council members to pass it. I also recommend council members and mayor that if this motion passes, that it also applies to prior evictions caused by the impacts of COVID-19 and that late and or collection fees are waived. Thank you for your time. My name is Costa Garcia. I'm a leader in Poder Popular and a current resident of Vista. I have been a longtime resident of Vista, and I believe this eviction moratorium would be a beneficial help. I recently lived in a room with my 3 sons because we couldn't afford an apartment. We had to share a room among us, and it was difficult. I was finally able to save money and move out to an apartment with my cousin in March. Unfortunately, in April, they laid me off, and it has been difficult. I'm worried for the month of May. I'm sure so many other families are too. This eviction moratorium would be a huge help for me and my family, who has been struggling financially. I haven't received an eviction notice, but I know others have, and it's important to protect them too. So consider also extending this to those who have prior eviction cases that are caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, council members, for your time. My name is Hilda Lopez. I'm a leader in Poder Popular, and I have lived in Vista for 17 years. My husband was working in the past not too long ago, and now with the pandemic of COVID-19, he has stopped for reasons to follow the CDC guidelines, but also because he has had many cancellations and no calls for job opportunities. He is a handyman and works on projects, both outside and inside homes, and his clients have had to cancel the projects, and this resulted in losing income. My husband is the main breadwinner of the family, and I did work by providing caregiving services to a couple seniors, but because of their delicate and vulnerable state, I couldn't work anymore. Even 2 or 3 days of lost wages has a huge impact on our ability to pay rent, and it's been more than 3 days of wages lost. I'm a leader in our community, and thankfully I've been able to find small income here and there, and our family has been able to pay this month's rent. But I'm really concerned for the next month. We have had to make choices between paying bills or food and on a strict budget. We were stressed about the next meeting. we're stressed about the next month. This eviction moratorium would be a great help for my family and other Vista families. Thank you, council members, for listening to my comment. I'm Jovita Serafin. I'm a leader in Poder Popular, and I reside in Vista. We are still not feeling the economic impacts of COVID-19, but I know of families that have. At my apartment, a letter from the landlord has been sent 20 days before the rent was due that was insensitive, basically stating that they don't care how COVID-19 has impacted our household income and that we, tenants, are still required to pay the rent. I got angry that we were being told that during this time, and it upsets me because I have neighbors that are in great need and have been greatly impacted by this crisis. As a leader in my community, I started packing small bags of food that are both from donations and from my own pocket. I shared that with my neighbors. One of them is having a hard time because both her son and husband were laid off. Council members, I urge you to support this and also consider financial support for low-income families as they are gravely impacted. I appreciate your time and please consider those recommendations. Hello, council members. I'm Lucia Hernandez, a volunteer for Poder Popular and a resident of Vista. I'm worried for the folks who just got laid off as they're worried that they will be without a home by next month. Even before this crisis and with secure employment, it was already difficult. The cost of living exceeds the salary, and now it's even worse. Without work, there's no income, and therefore no one can afford getting sick, especially undocumented people because they have to pay out of pocket. Because of that, I don't have a right to get sick. Undocumented people don't have the right to get sick because we don't have adequate access to healthcare, and the economic barrier worsens it. Those who can't get Medi-Cal or have barriers to healthcare are left outside. I tell myself every day to not get sick because I can't afford it. Along with the moratorium, financial help for all low-income families would be helpful. Many of us are not qualified to receive aid, and it's sad because we are still exposed and some of us are still working outside doing heavy labor for little pay. I'm glad to see those who are economically stable are okay at home, but do think of us who can't afford healthcare and are at risk. We're also humans and also count. Council members, I appreciate all the efforts so far, and I encourage you to move this moratorium forward as well as considering ways to support all families that are low income. Thank you. I'm Enriqueta Guillon, and I've been a resident of Vista, California for 20 years. Everyone should be protected. We need to take care of Vista's residents so we can take care of everyone. I've been laid off and it has impacted our household. My husband doesn't work because of his health conditions, and I worked to provide income to our home, but now that's difficult. Council members, I urge to support this moratorium and also consider that late and or collection fees are waived, and this moratorium applies to evictions impacted by COVID-19 prior to the motion being passed, like the city of San Diego has. Families are already experiencing threats to being evicted, and they should be protected too. Thank you for your time. Hi, I'm Santa Rodriguez. I have been a resident of Vista for 17 years. I ask you council members who have worked hard during this time to support this motion because the reality is that we're already living in neglected conditions. I've experienced disrespect, neglect, and even discrimination as a tenant who rents. We need protection, and this would be one step towards that. I also recommend that this moratorium is passed, that it should also protect families who are already experiencing eviction due to the economic impacts of COVID-19, and that late or collection fees are waived. We are already enduring enough as it is, and this would be alleviating. Thank you for your time. Hello, my name is Socorro Ramirez, a leader and volunteer for Poder Popular and resident of Vista. Thank you for taking my comment, council members, and the work you are doing to protect our families. Obviously, we are enduring a hard time with low employment opportunities. For me, the bills have piled up and I have had to make decisions to cut non-essential services, choosing that my money goes towards only the most essential items. It's a hard time for everyone, and we are all making these choices. Please protect our families, our neighbors, our residents, and constituents. An eviction moratorium would alleviate the stress that many are feeling. I would recommend it should also apply to eviction cases caused by the economic impacts of COVID-19 prior to the passing of this moratorium, and to waive late or collection fees. Our families need protection. Thank you for your time. Hello, I'm Susie Garcia, a leader and volunteer for Poder Popular, and I've lived in Vista for 20 years. I encourage the council members to pass this eviction moratorium, as this time is stressful for all of the community, specifically those who are unemployed. People are scared, and the majority lost their job to reestablish themselves won't be easy. They need reassurance and a way to do so is to protect them in this one way. I also recommend that the protection extends to prior eviction cases caused by the economic impacts of COVID-19, as the city of San Diego has. We already are hearing of people getting notices, and it's not okay and safe for the general public health. Thank you, council members, and we hope you pass this. Dear Mayor Ritter and City Council members, I am a resident of the City of Vista, and I'm writing to express my full support for the City of Vista to adopt and implement a temporary eviction moratorium. During these very uncertain times, dealing with the public health crisis, it is imperative to prioritize housing stability to all residents in our community. Many folks in our community are experiencing severe financial crises due to compliance with stay-at-home orders and/or unexpected layoffs. The recovery from this will by no means be quick and/or easy. Therefore, it is crucial and proactive to discuss and consider further actions on a local level for our community. We must consider a freeze on any lease terminations for the duration of the statewide emergency, maintaining current rent levels and freezing any rent increases during this emergency, as well as after the emergency order is lifted. And most importantly, mandate a reasonable payback period and continue to protect tenants after the state emergency is lifted. Many families that are undocumented do not have access to many of the financial assistance and resources that have been created to assist during this time. We must also consider this and help protect and support them on a local level through financial assistance similar to what has been done by the Mayor of Los Angeles. I urge you to move forward with the decision to adopt and implement the temporary eviction moratorium, as well as consider the suggestions presented above. Thank you for your time and consideration. Stephanie Hurtado. Dear Vista Mayor and City Council, I'm a student who has lived in Vista since I was 4. In light of this national pandemic and the economic insecurities that come with it, I urge you to vote yes on discussion item number 1 regarding the temporary eviction moratorium. This unexpected global crisis has disrupted all of our lives, and it is important that at this time to give some necessary security to those who are vulnerable to losing their shelter. The temporary eviction moratorium gives essential protection that is lacking in the state and county eviction moratoriums. Tenant needs these protections. Number 1, 30 days to communicate with their landlord as opposed to the 7 days proposed by the state. Number 2, the 6 months to pay back the unpaid rent is a more reasonable time period, as many who have lost jobs and hours need some time to get back on their feet financially. I hope that in our efforts to protect our citizens during the stay-at-home order, we can protect our renters, a large population of our citizens in Vista. Sincerely, Josephine Hansen. Dear council members and Madam Mayor, I am in support of the resolution giving renters in Vista additional protection from eviction due to these dire times. I've been a landlord for 20 years, and if I were still, I'd be working with my tenants, lenders, and elected officials on how to work through this crisis. This resolution is one way to help our community rebound from this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you, Nancy O'Shell. Dear Vista Mayor and City Council, I am a working class Vista resident and a renter. I am fortunate enough to be currently working safely, but I know that many of my fellow Vista residents cannot say the same. The pandemic is hurting working folks in many ways. That is why I urge you to vote yes on discussion item number 1. We need all 3 solutions in order to get through this difficult time. Protection from eviction, 30 days to notify, and 6 months to pay. Thank you very much. Daniel Isaacson. Dear Mayor and council members, please take a moment to consider some of the problems with the language of the proposed eviction moratorium. Let me start by saying that as a landlord in Vista for a multi-family apartment complex, I am not opposed to an eviction moratorium. Personally, I have not filed an eviction in over 20 years of ownership. However, for the sake of everyone who might be affected by this ordinance, I believe it should be modified to clear up several ambiguities and problems as follows. Section I-1B prohibits notices for non-payment by the landlord but gives the tenant 30 days after rent is due before being required to notify the landlord and provide documentation. I believe the county emergency ordinance gives the tenant 7 days to provide documentation, which is much more reasonable. If the landlord serves a 3-day notice for non-payment of rent, files an eviction, and then weeks later, on the 29th day, the tenant provides documentation, is the landlord in violation? Or has he or she just wasted time and money because of the disconnect created by the 30-day allowance? C, nor may a landlord seek rent that is delayed for reasons stated in this ordinance through the eviction process. At some point after this is over and there is no more moratorium, evictions for non-payment will resume. If the landlord is limited to seeking only the rent due outside the effective dates of the moratorium, this language is ambiguous and unnecessary. Item D, this entire section is vague and very one-sided, and that none of the cited circumstances necessarily means a tenant is unable to pay any rent at all. For example, if someone is homesick and being paid sick leave by their employer, their ability to pay rent is not entirely impacted. Unemployment plus $600 plus relief checks will hopefully be available to some. Item 3, in quotes, compliance with an order to avoid congregation, in quotes, already applies to everyone, right? The personal financial impact of social distancing will vary widely by this language, but this language makes it proof of financial impacts. I propose adding language, in quotes, to the extent the ability to pay rent is impacted, end quote. So this is not presumed to be the case if any items 1 through 5 are present. G, Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency March 4th by retroactively enacting this moratorium. All landlords who served notices or filed eviction actions are in violation and subject to penalties. This could still suspend pending actions, but should exempt landlords from retroactive penalties. If you are truly concerned about conserving affordable housing, how about some relief for the many mom and pop landlords who own 1 or 2 rentals and are much more vulnerable to a moratorium than multi-unit landlords? Consider suspending property taxes, sewer, and other fees for those small landlords who can show a loss of income due to the tenant non-payment. Again, please take enough time to come up with a thoughtful and balanced ordinance to help those truly in need. Thank you for your efforts, Leigh Rayner, Hilltop Apartments. And that concludes the public comment we received.
Okay, thank you. So then I guess we'll go into comments here from our council members. And I guess I'll start with Deputy Mayor Rigby. Do you have any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor? Oh, we're not, there we are, unmuted.
Sorry, I need to unmute. I do have a couple of questions. And I do know that the governor already has enacted a moratorium on evictions for impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus. And it covers everybody in the whole state. And so I'm wondering, because you did not reference that or include a copy of the current statewide mandate that does this very, very thing in your report. So I'm wondering, what are the differences between what's already enacted statewide that does pretty much what you're asking here? What's the difference between that and what you're proposing here?
Am I able to answer?
Yes.
Some of that?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So thank you so much for the question. That is definitely a question I anticipated to receive. So that's why in my opening comments, I referred to some of the additional provisions that we're outlining here in this measure. One of the really important things, and actually it's been a request from the public, is the extension for repayment. So I think we heard that over and over in our public comment, that 6 months is a good time frame to help people that are getting back to their full-time hours, in some cases having to find employment again, getting employment, to be able to repay and maintain a roof over their heads while they're picking themselves back up. Right. So that's a really important distinction, because that is not part of the current language at the state level. So just want to hone in on that. Also, one of the things that was mentioned a lot in the public as well, and it's a comment that I made opening this item, has to do with the notification period. So 7 days versus 30 days. So here in Vista, if we were to enact this ordinance, like some other cities have, they are providing a 30-day window. So that way, depending on what the documentation is, it could take some people some additional time to get that all together. But it does provide a 30-day window for the tenant to provide their landlord with the necessary documentation that illustrates their financial hardship due to COVID-19 income loss. So that's the really important distinction. Also, let me go through my notes here. Let's see. And again, that's 30 days from the time that the rent was due. One of the things that, and I don't believe that this is part of the state language, but it has been part of, again, the comments that we've been hearing from the public, but it has to do with late fees. So one of the things that this ordinance is looking at is not necessarily allowing a landlord to charge late fees for rental payments that fall within the terms of the respective ordinances. So that's really important too, because right now, when we're in a crisis, for those who have documentation, they can show, they can illustrate, they have all the proof that shows, hey, you know what? I have been paying my rent. I am in a bind right now. I'm gonna get it in, but I need some additional time. 6 months, 30 days to provide documentation. And if we're looking at suspending the ability to, and I don't know what the legal terminology would be, but suspending the ability for additional fees to incur, I think that's really important. Again, especially with the demographics of our city, because if you already have someone that can't pay, and they're working, they're trying to scrape money. I mean, we heard public comment, people are doing odd jobs. They're just trying to get something in. And maybe they can't pay the full amount. Maybe they can just pay a little bit. But, at least this is providing them with a little bit more additional relief. And then when it comes to, and keep in mind, this is for residents, and this is on the commercial side, right? So commercial tenants as well, which I think is really important. Because we discussed on the business side earlier today some of the issues and strategies, but this wasn't a particular part of that discussion. And so I think it is really important for us to I know as the city of Vista, the few tenants that we have, we're looking at different strategies. And so I think as a city as a whole, it would be really good for us to provide our commercial tenants some possible relief as well. And at the end of the day, this is not to, attack landlords or reduce their stream of income. There are different programs available to landlords that are just not available to tenants. So I hope that I was able to address some of the differences and some of the additional scope that this ordinance would capture to really provide the footing that our type of population that we have here in Vista, residential and commercial, that they get the help that they need on a short time. It's a very short basis of time, right? And so I think this is something that we can do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. As a city, and we talked a little bit about our role in life on a previous item, telling people that they're not going to be paid for 6 months, I have a little bit of heartburn with that. They also have responsibilities and they have things, and it's kind of a ripple effect. And I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know where the middle ground is in that. I'd like to hear what my colleagues, our colleagues, have to say about it. But thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for the question.
So, Councilmember Franklin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had something up here that I wanted to read from. And let me get this back up if I can find it. About 2 weeks ago, Governor Newsom gave authority to municipalities to enact moratoriums on evictions. And we saw a lot of municipalities act and pass eviction moratoriums. Since then, about 1 week ago, the governor broadened that authority and gave authority to California's Judicial Council to enact a broad eviction moratorium. The Judicial Council did act about 1 week ago. They have completely banned all unlawful detainers, otherwise known as evictions, for both commercial and residential tenants in the state. And important among this, it provides a 60-day delay at minimum for all eviction proceedings after they're filed, even after the emergency order is up. And the moratorium itself is active for 90 days following the expiration of the governor's declaration of an emergency. I don't know if Mr. Johnson or Mr. Piper know what the expected end date of the declaration of emergency is. Obviously, the governor has the purview to extend the declaration of an emergency. So my guess is we're looking at a minimum of 2 months for the emergency order, the declaration of emergency. And then the statewide eviction moratorium will extend to 90 days at minimum beyond that date. So I think we saw a lot of municipalities act in the 1 week period of time between the governor giving that authority to municipalities and his further action to authorize the Judicial Council to take action statewide. So I think if you take time, and I've read the briefings, I've actually read through the 29-page order written by the Judicial Council. There are numerous protections for both commercial and residential tenants there. And it sounds to me like the notification requirement might be the one differential. However, the legal requirement on the notification is sort of moot because the eviction proceeding can't proceed one way or another under the current order of the Judicial Council. So I think if we were having this conversation 2 weeks ago, it would be an entirely different conversation. I'm very concerned that by enacting a second and duplicative moratorium, that will be creating a lot of uncertainty and a lot of difficulty for compliance. I think it's better for us to defer to the state on this subject and not to overlay a second, primarily duplicative set of policies. I think what the state has done is very clear. I do appreciate having a chance to talk about the item because I think there's a lot of the folks that made public comment, and you can hear in the comments, are calling for, quote, a moratorium, and they may not be aware that the state has already enacted, or they may not have gotten the most recent news, but the state has enacted a statewide moratorium for both residential and commercial. So I think the action that that would have a week ago before the statewide action, I think it'd be a very different conversation. But I don't think we want to enact a duplicate. And there's still authorization for the Judicial Council to go further. As this crisis unfolds, we may see more guidance from the Judicial Council that limits evictions. And so I think we ought to defer to the authority that the governor has granted them.
Thank you. And I'll kind of jump in here because I actually was going to say some of the same things you were saying, Councilmember Franklin. The Board of Realtors or the Realtor Association sent us a copy of the California Judicial Council. And so I read through that today also, and it is duplicative. And I think Poder Popular needs to maybe look at that and help some of the people that were writing from that instance. And then I also heard the one lady say, they couldn't get any medical help. And I know that the Vista Community Clinic will take anybody at the clinic over there. So they need to get that information out to people. And I think a lot of the people wrote that were from Poder Popular. And I think that maybe that they need to get the right information to people, because I think a lot of what the Judicial Council wrote was after some of these other cities passed their ordinances. So I think it would be duplicative to change that. So I think we need to just go with what they're, and I also read in there that the late fees and collections, I read in there somewhere that they were actually waived on some part of that I read that in there also. So those are just some notes that I took. So anyway, I'll move on here to Councilmember Green.
Sorry, yeah, that was my thing too, as I was kind of trying to figure out what the differences were. And just so that I can be clear, because I think a lot of it does have to do with misinformation. I mean, having a moratorium and then having the Judicial Council weigh in on it, it sounds to me, if I'm not mistaken, that a property owner isn't even necessarily allowed, let's just say per the documentation, the state of emergency is up on the 31st of May, 90 days from that date is the first day he's allowed to even file an eviction. So that means to me that basically 150 days from today is the first time that an eviction proceeding would even start. And per my experience with evictions, if the eviction or the tenant is okay with the eviction, it would take another 60 days to evict. If he contests the eviction, you're talking about a whole nother 120 to 180 days before the actual eviction is complete. So the way that the current state law is written, a tenant could realistically stay in a property without paying rent. Not that I would encourage this by any means, but for up to a year without being thrown out of their property per, eviction proceedings. So it sounds like they've really put a lot of protections in place. I know that the county did have an eviction moratorium that was co-authored with Nathan Fletcher and Kristen Gaspar, and I know that it passed unanimously. So I kind of wanted to look into that to see what their differences were. They did initially start out with 15 days, but then they went back to 7 days. As far as the notification goes, I know that Councilwoman Contreras is asking for 30 days. And as somebody who has rented before, if I couldn't afford my rent coming up on the 1st, I knew I couldn't pay it on the 1st. And I would try to communicate. I think allowing a tenant a whole 30 days to not even communicate with their landlord, an open form of communication with the tenant, I think is a good thing. You should be communicating as soon as possible. The county did allow 3 months for the repayment, but once again, their thing was drafted back on the 24th of March before the Judicial Council met. So I'd really like some more information. Quite frankly, I feel like if I'm a renter right now, I am completely protected. If I'm the homeowner and I can only get 90 days of deferred mortgage and a tenant doesn't have to pay for a whole year, I feel like the homeowners are the ones who are going to be hurting financially. To address somebody's concern where they said, look, I don't know if I'm going to buy groceries or pay rent. Buy groceries. 100% of the time, buy groceries, especially in this climate that we're in. And a lot of the letters said, hey, I need you to pass this because I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my rent coming up. And in the same breath, we're saying this moratorium has nothing to do with whether you're paying rent or not. So I want to make sure that we kind of balance the two out. If you can't pay your rent, there are safeguards in place that for up to 150 days, they're not even going to start evicting you. That's a really long time, because a typical eviction, if you don't pay rent for 12 days, I believe that's when a landlord can give you a notice to, pay rent or quit prior to filing eviction. So these additional precautions that the state put in place seem to be pretty, tenant-based protections. I don't know if that's the correct verbiage for them. They seem really tenant-based. I definitely want to protect our residents. I want to make sure they know if they can't afford their rent, there are protections in place. But I think kind of what, Councilmember Franklin said, with everything that's happened over the last week, it just seems like they've done a lot of this stuff. Like the late fees, it sounds like they're going to be waived. I can't guarantee it. But if we said that as a city, and I would almost defer to my city attorney, if we were to say, hey, we're not going to charge late fees on rent that's paid in a moratorium, and the state or the Judicial Council doesn't support that, are we then liable for that part of the fees or whatever as a city?
Well, that's an interesting question, Councilman Green, to which I'm pretty sure there isn't a clear answer at the moment. But as a general proposition, we can't rewrite somebody's contract for them. We can't say, well, you contracted to, buy a car and pay 18% interest, but that's too much. So now you're only going to get 6%. The Constitution doesn't permit us to rewrite people's contracts. So I'm not at all sure that it permits us to rewrite a contract that provides for interest on late payments or penalties or anything like that. However, it's an unusual crisis. And curiously enough, to the extent that the Federal CARES Act applies, the federal government has said that the federal government has said you can't charge late fees on late payments. And the federal government has also said that you have until, until July 25th to pay rent. And you can't charge any late fees. Now, is the federal government going to be liable for those late fees? I do not know. But the federal government has its own moratorium in place. And we're kind of in uncharted territory when it comes to that. Certainly many people have put that in place. Curiously, the state did not say anything about that. So I'm not sure that they felt that there was a risk they would be liable for reimbursing people who didn't get late fees because they said they couldn't have them. One other thing I think I should mention is the 7 and 30-day discussion. The 7 days that the state provided as the notice period only had the effect of changing the amount of time somebody has to answer a complaint for eviction. So normally, if you're served with a unlawful detainer action, the tenant has 10 days in which to answer. The state has changed the rule such that if you contacted, made this notice within 7 days, then if you get a subsequent unlawful detainer, you have 60 days to answer, which of course extends the whole timeline of an eviction out by 60 days, 2 months. I don't believe that as a local agency, we can change that rule. We can certainly provide that somebody doesn't have to provide notice within 30 days, but I don't think we can give them the benefit of the extra 60 days to answer the complaint. That's a matter of state law. We don't control state law. So I'm not entirely sure what the practical effect of 7 days versus 30 days has, because the only effect that I know of in this notice is that it extends time to answer a complainant unlawful detainer, and that's purely a matter of state law and the regulations.
So there's some things on here that even if we said we wanted to do, we may not be able to do anyways because it's beyond the scope of what we're able to do legally.
I'm not saying that. We can certainly provide that a tenant has 30 days. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what advantage that gives them because it doesn't give them the advantage of what they would have gotten by complying with the governor's 7-day rule.
Yeah.
But we certainly have, I think, the power to say that. Yeah. I just don't think we have the power to give them the relief that the governor was offering them.
Yeah, and for some reason, and I don't know why, but after the county passed their resolution, which started with 15 days, they changed theirs back to 7 days. So I don't know if maybe they found something out that we didn't know, but initially they did agree that they would do the 15 days thing, and they changed it back to 7. The other thing that the county did when I read their eviction moratorium, because that was something that bipartisanly passed unanimously, was that it was a 3-month repayment as opposed to a 6-month repayment. But my question is that I didn't know is how long is the state allowing for repayment? Like, I would assume they have a structured repayment policy if you're not going to be paying your rent, or do they not have a structured repayment policy?
I don't believe they have a structured repayment policy as such, but they have reconfigured the unlawful detainer process to create at a minimum 6 months, I would say. No one, assuming the governor's emergency declaration expires at the end of 60 days, which is in the early part of May, then you have May, June, July. It would be August before a landlord could even file an unlawful detainer action. Then you have 60 days before they'll even consider it, issuing it. And then should the tenant choose to fight that action, you're quite correct. I would anticipate that, for example, if I were representing a tenant under those circumstances, the first thing I would do after I'm actually forced to take a position would be to ask for a jury trial. Which will, Lord only knows how long it would take to pull that together. And the other factor that comes in here, which may or may not involve more judicial council action, is that when the courts do reopen, their priority is going to be criminal cases, not civil cases. So while eminent domain has a civil priority, the criminal cases will nonetheless take priority over the civil cases because of the constitutional requirements that attend somebody who's been charged with the crime and having a right to a hearing and everything within certain parameters. So I think the future for eminent domain is, not eminent domain, excuse me, for unlawful detainer is cloudy at best.
Yeah, and it sounds like to me that there's just a whole lot of precautions already put in place for the tenants. I mean, what I would request is, because you don't want it sends a statement, if we were to say, hey, this is an eviction moratorium and we're going by the state of California and the judicial court hearings, and we're going to keep changing our support as their laws change, because they've been changing. Everything's been kind of fluid. I would be okay with that, as opposed to trying to create new verbiage that we're having to go back like other cities already have and rechange because they're changing things and figuring things out. So, one thing that I would like to do in the event this doesn't go through, like if we can't get a second, if we can't, figure out some type of eviction moratorium statement as a city, is that we get out the facts on evictions. We say, hey, do you know that there's a statewide moratorium, and per the governor's guidelines, the first date that an unlawful detainer can be filed if the state of emergency is lifted on the 6th of May is the 6th of August. Therefore, your court date would be on the 10th of August. People don't have this information, or the 10th of October. Giving people the information is power. And I don't want them to think as a council we have no, feelings for what they're going through. We obviously see what they're going through, and it seems that there's precautions in place to protect tenants and also protect landlords who have mortgages. It's the landlords who are living off of this money as residual income that are going to obviously need a whole lot of help, because having a mortgage for, forbearance isn't as hard as, hey, this is my income to survive off of as somebody who's retired. But anyway, with all of that said, I just feel like there's a lot of things that are already in place that people may not be aware of. And as the city saying, if we don't file an eviction moratorium, like, here's the facts on evictions. The judicial council met on this date. This is how long before they can file an unlawful detainer. Like, that information is great. I would think if the Unipop, population that submitted the letters to us knew that they had realistically until October for a court date, which gives them the 6 months to work on repaying, or the 3 months. I mean, it gives everybody a lot of time. They would feel a lot safer and they wouldn't be so stressed, because somebody saying they don't know if they want to pay rent or eat groceries tells me that they don't know they have 10 months or 8 months before they're thrown out of their house. Because if you tell me I don't have recourse for 8 months, I'm feeding my family 100% of the time, as everybody should. So I don't know. Those are my comments. Sorry to be so long-winded. I have a lot of questions.
Okay, then.
Sure.
And I'm going to throw it back to Karina or Councilmember Contreras. I'm going to throw it back in your court because you're the last speaker. You already spoke, but I'll throw it back at you.
Sure. Basically what I'm hearing, and I appreciate the discussion because I think this is a discussion that we should have had last time we met. And so I think it is a slight failure of leadership, which I take a personal responsibility for. However, how I'm hearing it is that, okay, there are protections at the state level because the county that's dealing with unincorporated, right? And so there's protections at the state level. And you know what? We're not going to do anything because we think that the state is adequate. Probably the first time I hear the council say that the state is adequate. And guess what, people of Vista? If you're in a situation where you can't have repayment, you can just face the whole process of eviction, whatever it looks like at the time. So that's what I'm hearing. I think that we should move forward with whatever there is consensus that is an additional layering on top of what the state has done, just to provide our residential and commercial tenants with a little bit more clarity and ability to make themselves whole. So that's my ending comment there. Again, I have a motion on the floor. I'm not sure if I'm going to get a second on it. But I really do appreciate the discussion.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you, Councilwoman Contreras, for having this discussion, and to say that I also appreciated Governor Newsom stepping in and stepping up and doing the moratorium that he did for the state. I appreciate that very much. I had a phone conversation with our Assemblywoman, Tasha Warbach, last week, and we had a good conversation about this as well, and what it meant, and then what the Judicial Council was given authority to do. So I appreciate the conversation, and I know that I will speak for myself, but I'm sure my colleagues all would agree that we do hear and we do feel what people are going through during this time. We are not immune to it. Some of us are going through a lot of stuff ourselves during this incredible moment in global history that we are all facing together. So we're not blind to it. I think the state has done a very good job. They have done more than the original order, stepped in for a second time and then brought the judicial order and then giving them further authority. So I appreciate that all very much. And it was kind of heartbreaking to read some of the letters, because I did read every one of them as they were sent to me about choosing groceries or rent. I agree with Councilman Green. If you're making that choice, buy groceries. But also, I really feel like the information in the news hasn't gotten out into the community about what protections there are. And I think perhaps that's something that we could probably do a better job at in communicating ourselves to the community about what protections are out there for people. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for this conversation. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I might just jump in real quick, just want to let everybody know on the City of Vista website, under COVID-19, we do have that residential resources page, and there is the governor's executive order. There's information for landlords. There's information for tenants on there, and we can push that out again through social media platforms. But I wanted to let everybody know that that information is on our website right now.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Frozen time.
Yes. She's locked.
I'll go ahead and say, Mr. City Attorney.
I wanted to add one small tidbit that I think is important if the ordinance is not adopted, and that is to reference an element of the CARES Act, which is federal law and applies to anybody who has a rental unit that is in any way backed by the federal government, by any of the housing programs, which in reality is most of the loans, and that is that that act also applies a statute against even issuing a notice to vacate until July 24th if you're subject to the CARES Act. So if we have landlords who might be attempting to psychologically push people out, they would be in violation of that federal law in at least in many cases.
I was going to say, Mayor, we can see you, we just can't hear you.
Oh, you're on mute.
There you go.
My computer just went kaput for a minute. Sorry.
You know what? I lied, and I have one more thing that I want to say. I'm sorry. Whenever it's my turn again.
You're okay.
Okay. All right. So I know that we all also received correspondence that wasn't read out loud. And a lot of that correspondence did come from the San Diego Organizing Project. A lot of individuals from St. Francis, from St. Thomas More. And so, they had been following updates at the state level. And so I feel like their correspondence also, I didn't hear anyone mention their correspondence, but, I don't think it's necessarily misinformation. I think one point that's made, we definitely need to be able to educate the public about what is there. But I just wanted to give you also, as one last, hopefully maybe someone seconds this and we can get to vote and there's a pretty, but Legal Aid, their take on the Judicial Council of California, on the recent changes made there that we were previously discussing. So one of the questions that they had on their Q&A is, what do these rules mean for states, county, and local eviction moratoriums? And I'm just going to read, this is directly from Legal Aid. Though these rules effectively put evictions and foreclosures on hold, they do not establish any new tenant rights or defenses to an eviction, address requirements for notifying landlords or providing documentation when tenants are unable to pay rent due to financial impacts related to COVID-19, or address how repayment will be handled. If possible, tenants should try to comply with any local eviction moratorium as they provide additional protection. So all I'm saying here is that it is great what the state is doing, and I'm sure next time I speak, which will be tomorrow, to our state assembly member, Tasha Berner Horvath, she'll probably be ecstatic to hear that the council is really excited about what the state is doing, that they've done a phenomenal job. But I do think that it's important for us to take a look. The state is so different. The demographics are so different. Here in Vista, we have a population that needs additional help. All this is doing is providing a local ordinance that gives the framework for our tenants to have additional protections in a time of a crisis that is unlike anything anyone could have ever predicted. So if we're not going to act in a crisis to provide this much additional protection, I don't know what it's gonna take, So hopefully we don't have a worse crisis in the future. because I wish we would have discussed this meeting. No one brought it up. Right? In our special meeting, I had talked about how on the 18th of March, how this should, be an item discussed. I should have formally put it on the agenda, but no one else did. So it's interesting to hear that, if someone would have put this on the agenda last time, it would have passed unanimously. I don't know. That's kind of how I took the comments. But, whatever the case might be, I do appreciate the discussion. I think the public needed to hear it. And now they know where everybody stands, right? And so I just don't think, I guess I'm right now the odd one out where the state did enough. So I'll leave it with you all if you think the state did enough to protect our citizens here in Vista without, taking into account the specific issues that we have here in Vista that are unique, then that's just what it is. But I think it is important to have a local ordinance that people can look to, that's black and white and that provides the additional protections. But again, I'm really thankful for this type of caution because I think we did go through a very thorough discussion on this topic. And that's pretty much it. So that's my people should really look at their local ordinance.
Councilmember Green, are you waving at me?
I was. I just wanted to say, I heard what Councilwoman Contreras said, and, she said that she basically heard us say that, we didn't want to put any additional protections in. And I just wanted to throw out there that as a guy who's been in real estate for over 20 years, initially you could evict somebody super fast. And, like I say, after 12 days of non-payment, and, Daryl can kind of let us know when the unlawful detainer could be filed and all that good stuff. But there have been additional precautions put in place for tenants locally. And that's just what I wanted to say is 150 days of precautions, 60 days, and then another 90 days on top of it before it even starts. So the COVID protections, there was something put in place. And, the second point that I want to make is the moratorium that's before us is good through the 31st of May. Based off of everything that I'm looking at from the state guidelines, the Judicial Council and things, their stuff's taking our tenants and our residents well beyond the 31st of May. So I don't even know if we pass this moratorium, if it even has any real effect, because no evictions can even be filed until well after the 31st of May is my understanding. So saying we're putting a moratorium on them and we're doing all these things, nothing's going to be filed up until the 31st of May. So putting all those protections on top of it with this moratorium, it doesn't do anything unless I'm wrong on what's going on eviction-wise right now. So I just don't want to file a resolution just to file a resolution that doesn't have any action behind it is kind of what I'm getting at. So I do appreciate the conversation. I think it was a great conversation. I learned something new about evictions, and I hope that we can get this information out to our residents so that they know they are protected and you're not being thrown out of your house next week or the week after or the week after or the month after or the month after or the month after. That's a long time. So that's where I wanted to leave this. Thank you.
That's good. And we all care about all the people in Vista, and those are good protections that are put in place. That's a long time, and so I feel okay with those protections, but I do care, and I know everybody's struggling. I know that they're struggling, and I want to help them. But this does secure their housing for a long time, for several months. So that's my thing. So it looks like, yes, Councilmember Franklin.
Last thought, I thought Daryl made a really good point that if our notice period were to go longer, it might actually cause some people to miss out on, if they're following our ordinance, it might cause them to miss out on some protections of the state law. And that was that, the confusion that I was talking about that I wanted to avoid. I think, Legal Aid and other tenants' rights organizations, as well as the Apartment Owners Association, have already begun to put out guidance based on the statewide actions. And there's a clarity when you can look at the the analysis and summary, not only that your legal counsel is providing you, but also the statewide organizations are providing you based on statewide action, where when we start making a more intricate policy at the city level, it creates another layer of complexity, and actually, instead of helping, it could potentially hinder. And it also creates an additional barrier for understanding what your actual rights are, either as a tenant or a landlord. And so I think that's why it's important that we stick with what the state's done for now.
So I think with that, if we're all done, I think we'll move on to oral communications, if that's okay. City Clerk, do we have any oral communications?
No oral communications to read this evening. You did receive one written communication earlier today.
Okay, then with that, I will go on to remarks. I'll read mine, and then I'll see if anybody else has any remarks. And I just have actually 4 little things here. And if you have, number one, if you haven't filled out the 2020 census, there's still time. It's quick, easy, and safe. As of April 12th, the response rate for Vista is 50.9%. So we still have work to do here in Vista. The census gives us a clear picture of who lives where, so we can make sure Vista has an equal voice and a fair share of federal resources. So learn more about the census online at 2020census.gov. The next thing, during this difficult time of the COVID-19 emergency, we want our residents to be especially mindful of COVID-19 related scams via phone, email, or text. Don't click on unsolicited links and never provide personal information. And to learn more about those, check the city's website at cityofvista.com/COVID-19. In addition to the COVID-19 information we have on the city's website, we also want our residents to know that 211 are great resources for local services, referrals, including food, shelter, and health-related issues, or go online at 211sandiego.org. And finally, stay healthy at home during this crisis by visiting our Vista Recreation at Home website. That's Vista Recreation at Home, or vistarecreation.com, website for activities, programs, and exercises online at our vistarecreation.com. So that is all of my comments. I will go first to Deputy Mayor Rigby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you to everyone for tonight's meeting, and everybody who's out there watching and listening. I appreciate that you're participating. I want to say thank you to staff. But I also want to say to all of our community, to Vista, stay strong, stay safe, and know that we love you.
Can't read that.
Oh, it says, we love you. We love this.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Councilmember Franklin.
I just want to echo what the Deputy Mayor said. Really, thank you to all the people of Vista who are watching, who sent us their comments. A big thank you to staff for adapting to this new form of technology. Big shout out to Chris, our IT director, who made this work flawlessly with some practice before we got started tonight. He did a great job. And all of our staff did a really wonderful job adapting to this. So thank you for that. And thanks to my colleagues. And I wanted to give a plug out. I completed the census on my handheld phone. You don't even need the number that they sent you. Just go, you plug in your address, you answer a couple of quick questions. Many future generations of your progeny will thank you, because they'll be able to see where you lived and what your occupation was and all kinds of interesting facts 75 years from now when your census data becomes public record. I know a lot of us who've done genealogy research really enjoy being able to see those notes about our ancestors. So it's pretty cool. And of course, as we all know, it has a lot of importance to our community, starting with how we're represented in Congress and in the legislature. Last thing I wanted to say, I wanted to give a big shout out to our public works team, who is working really hard, even through social distancing and the COVID crisis. We have a lot of potholes everywhere in Vista. Our public works guys are doing a great job getting out, filling those right now. The more sunny days we have, the fewer potholes we'll see. Big shout out to Kuna and his team. We really appreciate that. That's something that needs to be done quickly to preserve the quality of our roads. So great work. Thank you, everyone.
They also did a great job during the rain, the big rains that we had. The Public Works was out there everywhere with the Vector machines. So, Councilmember Green.
Certainly, yeah. A lot less places flooding in my neighborhood due to good public works. So, houses not flooding, roads not as flooded, which we had so much more rain. It was crazy that logistically they were able to pull that off. So, yes, big shout out to Public Works, Kuna, and the team. Also, thanks to everybody who's listening tonight online, who sat through the meeting, listened to the discussion. Thank you so much to my council members for just doing the research, showing up, and really caring about Vista. And lastly, just the Vistans, man, we love you as a council. We care about you. We do this because we want to make positive change, because we want to make positive impact. And know that we 100% support the state moratorium on evictions. And if you have a landlord who's evicting you or treating you bad, reach out to us as your council members. We'll plug you in with the resources to make sure that you're well taken care of. As a city, we're going to be real responsible with your money. We're going to make sure we have the resources available. We're going to make sure that you're protected, that public safety is top-notch within our town, and also that we work hard to rebuild the infrastructure after the big old flood and all these potholes. I know I'm driving over them as well on my side of town, Councilmember Franklin. So thank you so much to everybody in Vista. We're going to get through this. I'm at home with my wife, my 4 kids, and my nephew, and 3 dogs. So it's a lot, and I'm a lot to deal with, I know. So give grace, and hopefully you're getting grace as well. Have a great night, Vista. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Contreras.
Well, thank you all so much for another council meeting and various discussions, which I think are really important. I hope that we remain blessed with paychecks and healthcare and the ability to represent the people here in Vista. I know we all care about Vista. We definitely show it in different ways. So I hope that everybody gets a good night's sleep, and I send you all good vibes to you and your family. May we all get through this together. For those of us who maybe are trapped a little too much inside, hey, you know what? If you know how to play an instrument, I think we might need to do some virtual jam sessions together. So if you know, on social media, my handle is @RepresentVista. And if you want to hit me up and have a virtual jam session, please just DM me, and I'll see what we can get going.
I play the triangle.
I know, I've been waiting for that. You know what? A triangle, and we always need more cowbell. So keep that in mind. But thank you. I love you all, and may you have a good rest of your day. And unfortunately, I'm not doing my trash pickups on Wednesday because right now is probably not the time that you want to be picking up strangers' trash, right, on the street. But let me tell you, I just want to give a shout out to the group because you can see the difference. Unfortunately, in a bad way right now, that the streets are a little grimy. But you could really see the difference that picking up trash along the North Santa Fe, Luz Duran area, town site area, doing that weekly pickup made a huge difference. So I can't wait to start getting my steps in, talking to my community again, face to face, and picking up all this trash. So one day we'll get there.
City Manager Patrick Johnson.
Thank you. I want to echo what Councilman Franklin said about Chris Mitchell, our IT manager, who helped pull all this together and trained everybody and worked through a lot of the kinks. I know we had a little video glitch earlier, but we'll work that out for next time. But congratulations to Chris on that. And then just wanted to let everybody know that we were notified earlier today that the San Diego County Fair is going to be canceled this year. So as we get deeper into this, I think we're going to see a lot of events like that continue to be canceled, but just wanted to let you know that. And that's it. Thank you.
How about our city clerk? Do you have anything tonight?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
How about our city attorney? Any last words?
Well, a public service announcement to all of the drivers in Vista. Please drive carefully. Watch out for the potholes. Just because you hit a pothole and damage your tire and your rim does not mean the city is going to pay for it.
Oh, thanks. I would I would just say, everyone be safe. Be sure to
Those rooms
distance.
are expensive, by the way.
We're getting all the potholes will be fixed very shortly that are out there. So no worries. So anyway, just everybody distance, be safe, stay home, be well, and we will see you soon.
Report the potholes on Access Vista.
Yes, report. With that, we are adjourned.